I'm trying to get to the officer calling for cover, and he doesn't typically call for cover, so that was one of the weird things, and I knew he was one of the more active officers. So I'm coming up to a car that's trying to make a left-hand turn, and so I try to go around it on the right-hand side, and my windshield just shatters, and I'm livid. Like, how dare these people throw a brick at me? Now I got to deal with this. And so I stop my car. I hit the lights just to, mark where I'm at a little bit. And I get out of the car and turn around, and there's a guy laying in the street. And they start screaming about how I hit him. I'm not processing it yet, right? I still think that somebody threw a brick at my windshield. I never saw this guy. And it turns out that he had stepped out from in front of the car that I was passing and went up over my hood, into my windshield, flew up into the air, and landed. And all this is completely without my knowledge. So I see him laying on the ground. So I never made it to the call I was trying to get to. And now I'm getting surrounded by angry citizens. They're talking about how they needed to deal with me. And I'm sitting there by myself. And I've got, that was 2005. So I've got maybe a year on by myself in a car. So they send me home that night. And I get a phone call from one of the supervisors. And he says, I don't know you real well, but you're probably going to be removed from the department. The depositions for that deal, they questioned me for 6 hours. And it was just the weirdest questions, like, hey, how did your day start? And I'm like, I don't know. You show up to the station? And they're like, okay, and then what do you do? Well, we have detail where it's like a roll call. And they're like, okay, well, who called roll that day? And I was like, it could be any one of the sergeants. I don't recall. And they're just asking all these super detailed questions. And I keep telling them, like, man, I don't know. I don't remember. I can't recall. And we never even get to the actual event of what happened. And the attorney gets so frustrated with me. He goes, is there anything you do remember about this day? And I remember just kind of sitting there, and I said, yeah. My wife told me I was going to be a father. It was a hostage rescue on Bruton. I ended up getting put into the neighboring apartment. So I'm taking a little survey of the room, and I look over, and JT Curtis is sitting in a chair. And he's just sitting in the chair in his pants and t-shirt. He has no gun belt. He has no heavy vest. He has no helmet. His safety glasses are up on his head, and his eyes are closed, and his pistol is sitting on his lap. And I'm like, is this MF seriously taking a nap right now? I had that look on my face, and someone was like, hey, leave him alone. When that hole goes in that wall, he's the one that's going to stand up and take a shot. He's getting himself ready. Just leave him alone. If you find a problem over in SWAT and you take it over there to them, they dissect it completely, like blows your mind, because everybody thinks that these guys are just knuckleheads, right? They're just big, strong guys that break stuff. And it's really interesting to be in that arena with them and to watch them actually dissect those things. Going there and trying to supervise those guys, knowing that they are better than you in every facet of life. And now you're in charge of them. Hey, by the way, don't screw this up. We spend regularly 16-hour days together. We are stupidly close to each other way too often, and not with our families much. So you, by default, become family, and you start to know these guys. And then you're talking about trying to put these guys into positions that you know are extremely dangerous. But if anything happens, that's the decision that I initially made, right? I approved all that. And I think if you're in that position and you take it serious, that has to weigh on you.
You're listening to the ATO Bridging the Divide podcast, brought to you by the Assist the Officer Foundation.
Since 1999, the ATO has given assistance to the first responder community, and now we want to give them a platform to hear their incredible stories.
We also want to hear the stories of the many people that support us. Our community is small, but it is strong.
We have differences. We don't always agree, and we all make mistakes.
But together we can grow, we can heal,
And we can learn from those mistakes.
and together we can bridge the divide.
The gift of change. The greatest gift humans possess is the capacity to change. Unlike any other living being, we can reflect on who we are, imagine who we want to become, and take deliberate steps toward that vision. Change does not mean erasing our past, it means learning from it. A person can transform fear into courage, anger into understanding, and failure into growth. This ability comes from self-awareness, resilience, and hope, the uniquely human traits that allow us to adapt to new challenges and rewrite our own stories. The gift of change reminds us that no mistake is final, no weakness permanent, and no future fixed. As long as we are willing to grow, we carry within us the power to become better than we were yesterday. Today's guest is someone near and dear to this show's heart. You have heard his voice, alongside mine, for years. He has offered thought-provoking questions or commentary. He is best known for his wisecracks, diving in at the perfect time to add levity or insight. In today's episode, he is behind the mic, but will be taking a different role. He is now in the hot seat, bearing all and finally giving the listener a little insight into who Kent Wolverton is and what he has been through. All right, we finally talked this man into doing his own episode. He's been sitting here for nearly as long as the show's been going on, and he keeps refusing me. Finally, he agreed. Kent Wolverton, thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for being here. You're always here, but thanks for being here at the head of the table.
Yeah, it's
in the
weird.
hot seat.
It's a weird perspective from here.
Yeah, I don't think you've ever sit there. I do want to welcome on special guest co-host Danny Canetti's back. We have the great Matt Smith back to the mic, and it's been since episode 61, I believe, since you've been here.
It's been a little bit. I said I haven't been in this room since y'all moved over here.
Yeah, it's been a while, but yeah, we need to have you. We need to have more Matt Smith.
No, I appreciate the invite. Glad to be here.
More cowbell.
We need more cowbell.
More East
and more
Texas flavor to everything.
Yeah. Well, you're gonna have a British accent before this is over with. Anyway.
So my mother listened to, I don't know, one of the episodes Matt was on, and later she compared that. I think she watched the video of the HR downtown, and where you were talking to the girl through the door, and she said, "Man, if I was that girl, I would have walked out with listened to that sweet South Texas accent right there, or East Texas accent. I would have just given up right then."
I'm sending your mom a Christmas card for that.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah. Hello, Kim. She listens to them all. Well, you know the flow, Kent. This is the same recipe we use for every episode. We're just going to start at the top about where'd you grow up and talk about home life.
Before we get too far into that, I brought you guys something.
Okay.
Danny and Joe.
Oh.
I was out shopping the other day, and I came across these little owls. And
Oh, man, that's nice.
I know, Daniel, you're not officially a member of the owl unit.
Well, he's
but
been with it since
you
even
do
the
a
other
lot
units.
for this.
And
I know you're leaving and that you like to collect a lot of little junk to carry on in your house and just have things all over.
Yeah. This is really nice.
I picked them up at the store, and I was carrying them around. I was like, I think I'm going to get these for Danny and Joe. And then I put them in a bag. My son got a couple clothes and some other weird stuff, and he opened the bag. I didn't know they opened.
No, they open.
So when he pulls them out, he was like, great, they both broke.
Right. So just for the listener, I'm going to describe this. It's a little
Egyptian artifact
owl, and it's got little tiny rhinestones. Maybe they're diamonds. I don't know.
It didn't have rhinestones. I put those on there.
Oh, did you? Okay, yeah, I'm sure you used the
hot glue
tweezers.
Hot glue gun and-
yeah,
The
tweezers.
dazzled kit.
Very nice, very nice.
I took them off my jeans.
Danny has been part of the owl unit before it was even built in the early meetings, and he's been a checkpointer since day one. But yep, that's really cool. Thank you.
And one more thing that I'm going to throw a curveball here. Before I get too far into all these other stories and I forget to say anything, my wife and kids are amazing, and they've always been very supportive of me in my journey on the police department. My wife Kelly and my sons Kellen, Cade, and Cole. I really appreciate everything they do for me.
Well, that's your legacy, you know.
Well, then I'm in good hands because they're amazing.
Yep. I see their football videos all the time. They're pretty amazing. Yeah,
I'm
beasts.
such a turd with that, man. I
love it.
I make everybody watch videos of my kids playing football.
I love watching the proud father enjoy and appreciate the kids growing up. So now, are you ready?
Now I'm ready. All right.
Okay, you got the little owls out of the way. So, Kent, talk about home life. Where you grew up?
I grew up in the metropolis of Schertz, Texas. It was
not to be confused with Sharks.
It's very similar, very, very similar. Small town. I used to drive on the main road. It's 3009 is what we called it. It's 3009. And I used to ride my bike on that 3 miles to my friend's house. But when you go there now, it's a 5-lane road with stop signs and stoplights all over it. And it's actually, 3009 is actually named Roy Richard Boulevard, which Roy Richard, the guy that's named after, was my dentist. It also happens to be my dad's best friend and now neighbor. Somehow him and his best friend growing up managed to move next door to each other and made it my mom's decision. So,
wow.
Yeah, they pulled that one off. So Schertz is fairly small town. And as far as family structure with that, I had both parents in the house. My dad was an electrician. He started his own business when I was still pretty young, and that kept him out of the house a lot. You know, even before when he worked for a different guy, he was in Oklahoma more than he was in San Antonio or Schertz. So I kind of held that against him a lot because I didn't understand. You know, it's just my mom was always home while
he was always gone.
But my dad is still probably one of the strongest dudes that I've known, like physically. He's just like, if we got into an argument and I said my dad beats up your dad, I win. Like there was no doubt. I won that one every time. I have an older brother, and he and I were basically polar opposites growing up. So we didn't hang out much. We didn't play together unless we had to. He had his friends, I had my friends, and I had a great group of friends growing up.
What were some of your interests there in Schertz?
Anything that was a youth sport. We didn't have youth football back then, but we had baseball, basketball. I didn't get into soccer until later. I tried a couple times, but it's a military town. We're right outside of Randolph Air Force Base, so I'd missed the signups for soccer over and over again. But if there was a sport in session, I was playing it. I liked to read when I was younger. I think my eyes were a little bit better back then, so I could actually read. So I would read books just for fun. My grandmother was big on that. My mother was still an avid reader now. So, but I really just wanted to be outside, and the rule was if you go outside, you can't come back in. Right.
Yeah.
So there was no in and out at my house.
Oh, yeah.
Different time.
For sure. And we had a little wooded area right like a half block away from my house. So we spent hours upon hours in this little wooded area, and you know there was always rumors that there was devil worshippers. It's not even a full acre. I don't think. It might be 2 acres of wooded area, so it's pretty small. But it had trails, and we built little forts out there. And every once in a while, you'd find a rained-on dirty magazine that somebody had left. Yeah, a corpse too. Yeah. But no, it was just that's where we hung out, and that's what we did. And right up in front of that was like a little open field that was during baseball season. It was the baseball field. During basketball season, we'd just play in the street, and you know, football season, it was the football field. So, and it led right up into the main road of the city. And sometimes the ball would go across the street, and you just had to walk across to go get it. There weren't that many cars, but now you can't hardly look across that street.
Not a cell phone in sight.
No.
I think I really appreciate the small town because I grew up in Dallas and I moved out to Quinlan, Texas. You know, and it's polar opposite. I really appreciate the small town feel and everything you're describing. I mean,
So it was so weird in such a small town. My parents both graduated from the same school that my brother and I did. And my freshman year, I had a teacher that my dad had his senior year. And Dad was, I think it was in high school. It might have been right at it was 1994. I think he ran for election. He ran for county commissioner. And he was county commissioner for either 20 or 24 years after that. And then he took an election cycle off, and now he's actually running for office again. He can't stay still. He's like a shark. Like, if he just stops moving in the water, he dies. So he's constantly busy. He's got 3 other jobs still that he's retired, but he's got 3, 4 jobs at a time. That's just what he does.
No, it's not a bad. I mean, we got one shot this life, right?
Well,
keep moving.
Yeah, he does, and man, still in great shape and just sharp as a tack. So it's fun to watch him, but it's hard to get a hold of him sometimes.
When you were growing up, did you have an interest in, have an idea of what career field you were going to go into?
So when I was younger, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I love animals. I still, like, if you get me around a dog, you'll find a different person. I can't help myself.
Should have brought one in here.
There's a dog in
Should
here.
have brought a horse in here.
Yeah.
Horses, dogs. It doesn't, as long as it's not a cat. And I like cats. I'm just allergic to them, so I can't really hang out. But it's like the cats know that, so they're drawn to me more, and I'm over here dying and necks closing up on me and stuff. But no, that was my ambition as a young child, and even up into high school, was to go be a veterinarian. And when it came time to look for colleges, Texas A&M was the place to go if you wanted to be a veterinarian.
Still is.
Well, they required a 1050 on the SAT, or a 1250. I think it's 1250. And I scored a 1240. And so I'm sitting there, and I'm like, well, there goes A&M. And my mom's like, well, just take it again. It's the SAT. You can take it a couple of times. Took it again, scored a 1230, and I was like, nope, I'm out.
Yeah, this is going down. Yeah.
So instead of that, I ended up going to Southwest Texas State University up in San Marcos, about 45 minutes from the house. And, I didn't know what I wanted to study at that point. I was looking at kinesiology, wanted to be a trainer for a high school, and they had too many anatomy and physiology courses that were difficult, so I made it through about 3.5 years before I knew that was going to be the case. And they also wanted me to take Spanish, and I was just not good at Spanish. I understand a lot, but I can't speak it worth a crap, and writing it is even worse. So I'm looking through the old catalog they have for your college courses and what you want to major in. And I flipped a page from kinesiology or whatever it was, and it says health and wellness promotion. And it's almost the same thing. I'm flipping back and forth, and I'm like, these are the same courses.
Did it have an owl on it?
It did not.
No.
But it also didn't have Spanish or kinesiology, and I was like, or anatomy and physiology. And so I was like, I already have all these courses. I need like 2 more, so everything lined up for me, and that's what I ended up getting my degree in. 5.5 years of college for my degree. Yeah.
No. Did you ever think about being a coach, like a sports coach? Because I know how you think, and I know how you have patience and you convey messages. Did you ever think about going that route?
As a profession, I never really considered it. The trainer thing was about as far as I wanted to go with that, but as a volunteer, or even with my kids, I've coached all my kids. I've coached other people's kids. I've volunteered to coach teams that I don't have kids on before, and I enjoy that. I really do, and I think that there's a huge gap for people to have a positive role model. And
yeah,
I've met some of my best friends as adults through youth sports by coaching their kids, and it's funny because when I'm with the kids, there's coach, right? And that guy is pouring everything into these kids and trying to teach them the right way, not just to win games, but how to be a better person, right? And then I get around my friends, their dads, and I cut up, and you probably wouldn't want me anywhere around your kid, right? Like there's definitely 2 different sides of Kent when it comes to either coach or friend. And I laugh at it because some of my buddies' wives are like, I wouldn't let you anywhere near my kid again.
No, that's with anything. That's like even like some people wouldn't want to be around Kent the cop or Matt or Danny the SWAT operators, But you have really good. You're really good at flipping the switch, and that's how that's how everybody should be. I do want to get into why law enforcement and why DPD.
I graduated college, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? I kind of wanted to do the exercise, sports science stuff. I had an internship in college where I worked at a cardiac and pulmonary rehab facility that had a gym. And I found out I don't like dealing with people that don't want to exercise, right? Like, I couldn't imagine being a personal trainer at this point unless you have a select client base where you get to determine who you train, right? And when you're just starting off, you probably don't get that. So you get the people that don't want to do what you are telling them to do, or they want to argue or skip whatever. And I wouldn't deal with that well, and I found that I don't deal with that well in any aspect of my life. Like if people don't want to put forth effort, it's a problem with me. So I don't waste my energy on those people.
Well, they're exhausting
For sure.
And you ended up doing the majority of the work,
Right. So I decided I didn't want to go into that field, and so I took just about any job that came around. I was looking for any sort of work. I had applied with San Antonio Fire Department and Austin Fire Department. And I was like, man, that 24 on, 48 off sure does sound nice, right? Every day's a Friday. But Austin and San Antonio are huge departments. And when you apply, especially in San Antonio, being a military town that it is, previous fire experience got 5 points, and any military experience got 5 points. So they're starting at 110, and I'm starting at 100. I scored either a 96 or a 97. I scored a 96 in Austin or a 97 in Austin, and the other one was in San Antonio on the civil service test that they had. And I got a call back to go take the physical testing, and it's pass-fail, right? It doesn't matter how well you do. If you pass, you pass. I passed both the physical tests fairly easy. I was, 24 years old, 23 years old, and just great shape still. I didn't get a call back from San Antonio after the physical. And I was like, I missed 4 questions, right? Like how do you, but then I realized, okay, well, they could have missed 13 questions and they're still in front of me on that. So, and that, I think they said it was something like 3,000 applicants, and they were taking 200 people.
And what year was this?
Probably 2002,
Okay.
somewhere around there. Austin was the same way. They called me back and they had me take what they called the BPAD, the Behavioral Personality Assessment device. And basically it was they stuck you in a closet with a TV and a camcorder, and they would play a scenario on the TV.
Like a red room?
It felt like it. I mean, it was probably the most uncomfortable I've been. I don't want to add in a closet because that would just make it really weird. Mm-hmm. But you're in a closet and there's a scenario playing, and then it stops and the people are still tilting their head and looking at you, and it was a scenario of a school bus accident. And you're responding, and you're supposed to act like you're the fire department. And they're saying, what are you going to do? You got to get in there and do it. And I was like, okay, well, if you'll let me get over there, I'll go do my job. And I stopped after about 15 seconds of talking, and they have 3 minutes for you to talk. And I'm just sitting there. There's a camcorder on you, and you're just super uncomfortable in your suit. And the people on the screen are tilting their head and acting like they're listening to you, but you're not saying anything. Yeah. Weirdest thing I've ever been a part of, and apparently I didn't do very well on that because they never called me back either. So at that point I was a little bit defeated. So I worked as a valet outside of the Spurs games and the rodeo. I worked at a furniture store. I went in there and I was like, listen, I just need work, right? Do you have any room in your warehouse to move stuff, burn off a little steam? I was a substitute teacher, which is actually where I met my wife. I did absolutely anything I could, and the furniture store it was hilarious. They wanted me to actually sell furniture. The lady said, "You don't look like you belong in the warehouse. You need to sell furniture." And I said, "I don't have a clue about furniture." And she was like, "Don't worry, baby, I got you." At that point, I didn't realize what I was getting into, but I didn't sell but one table in 3 months, and it's all commission based, so I didn't make any money. So I had to walk out.
I would have loved to have seen that though. You pitching a couch and sectional versus the
it was a high end furniture. It was like a Haverty's or something, and I was like, I can't sell this stuff. I don't know anything about I'm pretty sure my dad built most of our furniture.
That's funny.
But yeah, it was weird.
You had an interesting connection though with DPD already.
I did, and that's how I got up here. I had a buddy that was in college at UTSA, and he got caught by a recruiting table, and he came up here. And he let another buddy know, hey, this job's not bad, pay pretty decent. I think it was just over $30,000 at that point. And they give you a gun and a car and a badge, and you get to go out and, chase people. And so my buddy Todd came up second. Todd Haker.
Yep.
One of my longest friends.
Good guy.
We
Very
met,
good guy.
We met probably before kindergarten. His mom used to actually take me out of school and take me to go get Church's chicken. It was one of the one of the highlights of elementary school was getting picked up by Todd's mom to go get Church's. By the way, Todd still only eats Church's chicken, occasionally at barbecue. But yeah, I just graduated college. Chris Lowe, he and I graduated college about the same time, and we were both looking for a job. And Todd and my other buddy were just wanting us to come up, and they were like, "Hey, you can drive up and spend the weekend with us and do the application process in a weekend." And I was like, "There's no way." Right? Like I've filled out these applications before, and I hate filling out applications. Like I applied for one college and I got into it. I applied for 2 fire departments and didn't get into them, and I was basically done. Like that was the end of my journey for that. So coming to Dallas for the police department, I was going to, sure, I'll give it a shot, right? Like it's going to be a weekend in Dallas with my buddies. Can't be horrible. So we drive all the way up here. We apply. And I don't remember if it was instant or if it wasn't, but they told my buddy Chris that he failed the polygraph. And if you know Chris, he's one of the cleanest people you'll ever meet. And I believe they said that he got popped for selling cocaine. And he was like, "I don't even know what cocaine looks like." We're driving back, and it might have been instantaneous or it might have been a week later. But I remember driving in the car with him, and he was just like, "How do I... cocaine, delivery of cocaine, I don't even know what that is." And he ended up coming back and taking the test again and passed it just fine. But the polygraph is a weird deal too,
Yeah, it's very subjective, yeah.
And I actually had trouble. I have a touch of colorblindness. So when I went for my eye exam, I failed the colorblind test, and they made me take a different, more specific test for colorblindness. And I remember just being super nervous about taking this test. And it's like they take a bunch of bottle caps that all have colors on the inside, and they flip them over and they shake them up, and they're like, "Okay, put them in order from darkest to lightest." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" Like,
They did that here?
No, I had to go to an optometrist.
Okay.
I had to find a specialist to go take this test to get a waiver to get on, because they were like, "You can't be a police officer and be colorblind." And I was like, "All right, well, there goes that one." But I ended up paying like $100 for this test, which back then I didn't have any money, so it was crazy. But
spending that Haverty's money.
Yeah, all that table money. I ended up passing that test and getting approved for everything, and then me and Chris moved up and got an apartment together. And
were y'all classmates?
Yes, Chris
Okay.
and I were.
I did not know that.
What class number?
278. He
motto.
Dedicated to the call and perseverance through it all. They didn't tell us we had to rhyme with the number, so yeah. And I think we came up with several, and they kept telling us we couldn't use it.
Yeah, that one. The others were taken.
Yeah, all the cool ones.
Who are some of your classmates?
Still on the department, I had Larry Bankston. Chris Lowe was our class president. Ted Byer. I had a buddy, Wes Colvin, that was in the class. Victor Lucas. God, there's so many names, but that's been almost 23 years.
They do get fuzzy.
Well, no, I could see their faces. Neil Ellis. Yeah, there's not many of us left. I mean, I thought that more would stick around, but sorry if I forgot anybody. I still love you guys. Oh, Jada Brody, Farmer, whatever her name is now. It's just Jada to me. Yeah.
Who was your advisor?
I think our first advisor was only there for a little bit. I almost want to say we had 3, but Christopher Hands was our first one, but he left us in the middle of our academy class and went to Frisco.
How was the adjustment to that academy life?
I was still fairly fresh out of college, so, and if you look at my GPA, I didn't study much in college either, but things weren't difficult for me. I mean, the physical part was fine. I had Cletus Judge as my DT instructor.
He wasn't running any either.
Yeah, we didn't have to run much. But, I mean, I don't remember struggling through the academy with much other than Mumford trying to use me as a demo for every chokehold and, technique that.
Well, you were taller. He didn't have to bend down so far to choke you.
But I was only like 180 pounds. Like I was 6'1", 180, which is not an intimidating figure. especially when Mumford was about 10 feet tall and, had veins bigger than my body running through his arms. I just remember that dude grabbing me, and I was like, jeez, here we go again. And next thing I know, my feet are over my head, and there's some weird pain in my jaw, and he's like, this is how you do it. And I'm like, okay, can you show on somebody else? Because I didn't see anything, and I'm about to black out.
You had a big life event in the academy, though, right? You got engaged.
I did. Right before I left for Dallas, I met my wife at school. She was a teacher there, and we kind of saw each other through the glass one day, and my wife is not a quiet person. She's actually very, very loud. She's Polish. So she went back into the back of the office after she walked through, and my assignment for that day, I was working the front desk, and I had to ask all the teachers which calendar they wanted to choose for the next year, as far as holidays or whatever. And so I had a roster, and so I used that to my advantage, and I was like, hey, you haven't voted on your calendar yet. I need you to sign off. So I got to find out that her name was Kelly, but she went into the back office and went to my old guidance counselor and was like, hey, who's that? And she's like, it's not quiet, right? So I hear basically half the conversation, and I went home for lunch, and I told my mom, I was like, hey, I saw this girl up at the school, I got to figure out how I can figure this whole thing out. And she was...
she's figured it out, clearly.
Well, she was a coach, and one of my buddies, actually my former college roommate, his little sister was still playing softball, and so we had to go watch his sister's softball games, of course, right? We had to support his sister, so I kind of made sure I was there, and she walked by one time. I stuck my foot out and was like, hey, why don't we go grab some Taco Cabana after this? And yeah, the rest is history. She couldn't resist after that.
Yeah, how could you resist Taco Cabana?
Yeah, I know, it's difficult.
So you got engaged in the academy. So.
I did. Okay. She had moved up here.
I was just going to make a bad joke. Now he got engaged in a Taco Cabana.
It was pretty close. It was actually in her parents' front yard. And a funny story about that, her family had taken a trip back to Detroit. They were from Detroit. And while she was gone, we had moved in together. But while she was gone, I went and bought a motorcycle, which is a pretty hefty expense and probably a bad idea on my part. I ended up wrecking that motorcycle not too long after that. But she came back, and she wasn't real happy that I just bought a motorcycle and not a ring, right?
Yeah.
But I did go and buy a ring shortly after that, and yeah, I rode the motorcycle all the way to her parents' house, and never been more scared. I had a feeling she wasn't going to say no, wouldn't have asked if I thought there was much doubt, but yeah, you don't just spring that on somebody and be like, hey, what do you think about getting married?
What do you think of my bike?
Yeah.
Well, here's a ring too. Yeah.
But yeah, I was shaking like crazy, and I'd already asked her dad and everything, and yeah, she fell for it. So
yeah, still there,
yeah,
still falling for it.
Almost 22 years later, she still hadn't figured out the banana in the tailpipe.
No, she just watched Beverly Hills Cop. So you're in the academy. I mean, you got all these hosts of instructors coming in from all over, and they're, a lot of people talking about how badass this division is versus that division. Was Southeast on your radar?
It was not. So my buddies were already at Northwest, and they sang the praises of Northwest just being a cool place. It's got
Lance Crawford.
Yeah, there's a nightlife, right? There was all sorts of guys, and that's where I wanted to go. And so when they came down for assignments, they said, all right, these people are going here, these people are going here. My name was on the list to go to Northwest, and I was so excited. And I told my wife at the time, my fiance, I was like, hey, I'm going to go work with Todd and Chris and these guys, and we're all going to be at Northwest. And we came in the next day, and they said, David Massey's another one that was in my class. And they said, Massey, you're going to Northwest. Wolverton, you're going to Southeast. And my heart just dropped. I was like, I don't know anybody at Southeast. Like, I've never even seen the place. Turns out I had seen the place when we came up to apply. My buddy Chris had family that lived down in Oak Cliff. And so we drove over off of Tioga, and that was...
Did you get mugged?
It was a different world, man. There was a dog walking a guy, a giant pit bull with the industrial chain. That's the one thing I remember. We went and knocked on the door, and Chris and I are in our suits for the interviews we had here, and we looked like Jehovah's Witness walking up to these people's
or
door.
detectives. Yeah.
Well, it was a definite culture shock for me, and it was not Schertz, Texas anymore.
And that was back when Tioga was still part of Southeast, and now it's South Central.
Yeah, and that was the weirdest part. When I remember one of my first calls over on Tioga, I was like, I've been here. And my trainer was like, huh? And I was like, don't want to get into it. It was scary.
So once you got out there, what kind of, huge culture shock, obviously, going to Southeast. What kind of work did you gravitate to?
Well, let's get through training first.
Okay.
My first phase of training was with Adrienne Thompson.
Yep.
And she was basically on a special assignment about prostitution over by the school over on Pennsylvania, the Phillips School. And we wrote so many prostitution tickets. That's basically what we would do, right? We would go out there and just fill up their pockets full of tickets every night and then maybe get a couple calls in. So I made it all the way through first phase of training without going to jail on an offense. I took a couple warrants, took this and that, but I'd never gone to jail and typed an arrest report for first phase. So then I go to second phase, which I can't remember if second phase was days or third watch, but basically, long story short, I went to jail one time on an offense on training at Southeast, in which you have to almost try to not go to jail.
I still don't know how you could do that.
Yeah, dumbfounded, right? After I got off training, I was like, I don't know how that just happened, right? But I still remember the arrest. I arrested Zeola Hunter off of Bud Time, and it was a injury to a child, and I'm pretty sure my trainer basically trumped up that charge a little bit more. She hit the kid, right? It did happen, but we arrested her son a few years later over in South Dallas selling drugs. He wasn't a great kid. So when I have little Anthony on the curb in handcuffs, we were filling out his booking sheet, and I was like, "Hey, who's your emergency contact?" And he said Zeola, and Zeola's not a super common name. And I was like, "Zeola Hunter?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Man, weird world we live in here."
It is a small world.
Yeah, I arrested your mom, and he was like, "That was you?" And so we had a good laugh about that, which is weird. When you're arresting guys with drug charges, they either are super pissed off at you or they understand the game. And
right.
This kid understood the game, and I actually, in preparation for this, I looked him up, and he's in jail right now for a drug charge. So apparently, whatever we talked about didn't
Old
sink through
habits
to
die
him.
hard.
Yeah. Some things never change. Yeah.
For sure. But yeah, Southeast, man, I didn't have a lot of experience on training with anything other than answering calls. My second watch phase was at the truck stops. I worked with Rocky Stevens, and Rocky taught a lot, but we didn't do a lot. So if you wanted to go see something, Rocky would take you over to go see it, right?
He was capable, not practical, as far as like.
Yeah, he was really old at that point.
Well, he was also and he relief trained me, and I got to say about Rocky Stevens, he taught me more about watching people's body language than any of my other. My trainers were not very proactive. So, but Rocky, when he relief trained me, I got more for one, paying attention where I'm driving. Like he would have me stop in the middle of the block and say, "Okay, tell me where you're at." And if I didn't know, I'd have to walk down to the damn corner and look at the signs.
Right.
And it only took twice doing that and figuring that out. But also watching people's hands, looking past the hood of your squad car, look halfway down the block, see the guy ducking behind a tree. That kind of got me along that vision that you have to have.
He did that same thing to me, and I remember just rolling up on one guy, and before we even get out of the car, he goes, "Did you see that?" And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." And he goes, "He just dropped dope right behind that tree." And I was like, "How do you know?" And he's like, "Watch this." So we get out and talk to the guy, and he says, "Hey man, did you drop it already?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he goes, "What was it?" He goes, "Just a little bit of weed." And Rocky just had a way of talking to people that completely disarmed them, and they would agree to everything that you said, right? It was crazy to listen to him do it, because at the truck stops, you'd get the phone call or the 911 calls about somebody stole my radio out of my truck, which basically means you were smoking crack and hanging out with prostitutes the whole time, and you ran up such a bill that they came and took your radio, and then they took your tires, and then they stole your gas, right? But it's because you ran up such a bill from smoking so much crack all night.
And banging the prostitutes over there.
Rocky would let me go through the entire interview and get all the information, and he'd actually have me type out the report. Like, go ahead and type out your narrative real quick, and let's just to see what you're going to put. And then Rocky would ask the guys, hey, who are you more afraid of for finding out the truth, your boss or your wife? And almost every time the guy would go, my wife. And he was like, do we still want to make this report? And 90% of the time, the guys were like, no. I don't want to have to come back here and testify and explain why I'm here. And Rocky ran the truck stops. Like, he knew everybody. They called him Sarge. He was a sergeant for the park rangers before Dallas had the park police. And when they disbanded it, he came over to Dallas Police Department. But he had, everybody knew they called him Sarge. And he'd roll up the window, drive up on people, and he'd put the window down. And he'd go, hey, what time is it? And they'd all say Sarge 30, which was one of the coolest things. And he was like, so are you supposed to be out at Sarge 30? And they were like, no, sir. And so people would disappear. Like, when they knew Rocky was at work, they weren't outside. And if they were outside, like you said, from down the block, he'd be like, hey, that's nationwide. You know, all these clowns had nicknames. And he knew each one of them by their gait. Like, he could tell, that's Peanut down there. And you're like, how do you, that's Bucket. Like, I can't even see that far, and I know you can't see that far. He's like, just how he walks.
Yeah, I guess I would equate him to like Robert Duvall's character, the great Robert Duvall, in Colors.
Very much so.
You know, and Rocky, one thing he taught me was, like, when you got a group of guys standing out, and when they see the squad car, their initial reaction, he said a lot of people will index where they're holding, whether a gun or drugs. They reach down, don't even know they're doing it, tap it with their thumb.
Yep, yes. Subconsciously touch.
And that is true.
So,
I mean, I do that with my keys in my wallet. I reach back and just make sure it's there, but they do the same thing with their contraband.
I learned a ton from him without having to go to jail for stuff, right? And that was the weirdest part of training for me. So when I got out, I didn't really know what was going on yet. So I answered my 911 calls, got in with some of the younger guys on the watch that were, about the same age. And
I would say, who are you hanging out with?
Oh, Brad Walker and I were partners for a while, and we got into quite our share of fun stuff there. Callan Stevens was there, Matt Kalanick, Sanchez, Bad Barton, Mean Green. There was just a ton of guys on the watch. Back then we all would answer calls together. We would just meet up and, hey, I got something I want to look at over here. And that was kind of the younger crew. There was an older crew too. I think Sayers and Motto were still on third watch at that point. There was just a ton of the older guys. Yerrick, Strauss, Higgins, St. Clair was back and forth between deep nights and third watch at that point. And they all had, everybody was capable of doing absolutely anything, which I thought was really interesting. Because the reputation was, well, these guys just chase dope. But they could handle any call that came out. And there were times where, like, if it was rain or something, shoot, Lauren loved working accidents. So he'd take an accident. And I hate working accidents. Like, if I could go back, the one thing I would do is learn how to work an accident well and quickly and be an accident investigator. Because it's got to be, like, it's repetitive, but it's just steady work, and there's definitely room for you somewhere on an insurance agency when you leave here. So that would have been what I would focus on. But what I did focus on was the fun stuff, stolen cars, anything in progress, and that all came with drugs, right? If you haven't figured out there's a drug nexus to every crime in Dallas, then you probably need to pull your head out, because 99% of our crime is related to drugs.
You struck me on something on your bio about your thoughts on quote-unquote proactive police work. Can you tell us a little further with that?
It just, and maybe it's just the wording, but you can't really do proactive police work. That makes me think of the Minority Report, right? Like arresting people before they commit a crime. You can go out there and you can find somebody with drugs, but they're committing a crime of already having the drugs, right? So it's not like you're being super proactive, but I like to make a report rather than take a report, and that's the way I would word it. If you get called to some place, you have to write down what they tell you, right? You have to take their report. You have to listen to what they say. If you go out and find guys that are in stolen cars or guys that are trying to sell drugs on the corner or burglars, right, for the most part, you get to write that report at that point. You get to make that report up. So I enjoyed that part of it way more than listening to people and remember what they said. And that was just mundane, but I mean, it needs to be done, right? That's how we find crime. So, and we're here to serve the citizens, but there's different ways of serving the citizens.
Yeah. When I was on training, it's called self-initiated. And that's what it was called, self-initiated reports versus what I call it. They call it call for service, it's something else, but basically, what was the metric of, did you do much today? I answered a bunch of calls, or no, I had, a
self-initiated activity.
And I remember that's what they called it, and it was like, that was obviously, it had more weight.
Yeah, just the whole term proactive policing, it just, I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me because it just seems like, I don't know, grammatically incorrect maybe.
Well, I think you'd be proactive and still answer a lot of calls because we all know there's a ton of calls need to be hustled out there. That's being proactive, but it's not self-initiated in a sense because you're responding to what's already happened, to your point.
There was a culture at Southeast that it was divided. You were a call answer or you were someone who was self-initiated activity, right? And that was always
you need both.
You have a
the
balance,
self-initiated activity people were, considered themselves the upper echelon of officers because they could, like you would say, they'd see indicators and they'd go after crime rather than wait for a phone call to come in and drive to the location.
Well, and the bureaus would call you if you had a reputation of being able to do that stuff, and they would give you different work. So there was a little bit of a hierarchy there, but at Southeast there was like everybody did everything, and it was interesting at that time. It was almost a competition, right? Like everybody wanted to go out there and find somebody that was committing crime and bringing a detriment to society. And when you brought up the call answers, it made me laugh. Mata used to send out messages back when you could send the message out to the entire channel, and it'd always be like, "Hey, you guys knocked down some of these calls. Fat Boy's getting hungry." And if you look, Mata's been on a mark out for 3 hours, sitting in a bush somewhere.
In 5'8", yeah.
But he would always send out something like, "Hey, I need to eat. Y'all knock these calls down so I can eat."
So I'm going to shift gears. You had a date. September 23rd, and can you just kind of walk us through that whole incident and the significance?
Yeah, so that was the best day and the worst day of my life, all wrapped up into one, and it's a pretty good roller coaster. My partner was off that day, and I don't remember if it was just his regular day off or he took the day off. But there's a concert out at Fair Park, and it's one of the but one of the bigger country acts. It might have been Pat Green or Cross Canadian Ragweed or something like that. I can't even remember who it was. So we're kind of driving through the parking lot, just listening to music, checking out the people coming in, and, making sure that area's not being broken into and things like that. And over the radio, one of our more proactive officers comes on the radio, and he sounded to me like he was in distress. So I'm like, "Hey, I'm right here." He was over off Dixon. Said, "I can head that way real quick." And so I start going, and something in his voice just struck me. It was like, "Hey, he needs us there." So I'm trying to get there. And Dixon Avenue, it's like a fishbowl. There's 2 entrances, and it's just one big long street, and you can't get anywhere else from. Like there's no turnoffs off that block. It's one really long street, and it's known for a lot of gang activity.
It's like its own city.
It really is, and I mean it has its own gang, right? The Dixon Crips over there.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get to the officer calling for cover, and he doesn't typically call for cover. So that was one of the weird things, and I knew he was one of the more active officers. So I'm coming up to a car that's trying to make a left-hand turn, and so I try to go around it on the right-hand side, and my windshield just shatters, and I'm livid. Like, how dare these people throw a brick at me when I'm driving through? Because it was right by the convenience store where all the problems usually were, and I was like, now I got to deal with this. And so I stopped my car. I hit the lights just to, mark where I'm at a little bit. And I get out of the car and turn around, and there's a guy laying in the street. And they start screaming about how I hit him. And I was like, I'm not processing it yet, right? I still think that somebody threw a brick at my windshield. I never saw this guy. And it turns out that he had stepped out from in front of the car that I was passing and went up over my hood, into my windshield, flew up into the air, and landed. And all this is completely without my knowledge. So I see him laying on the ground, and everybody's trying to go over there and move him. And I'm like, if I just hit this guy with a car, like, he doesn't need to move, right? Like, he's probably injured pretty bad. And so I start walking down there, kind of jogging, and I'd already put out on the radio that something happened over here and I need some cover also. So I never made it to the call I was trying to get to. And now I'm getting surrounded by angry citizens, right? And they're talking about how they need to deal with me. And I'm sitting there by myself, and I've got, that was 2005, so I've got maybe a year on by myself in a car. And I remember a squad car pulls up right behind me and actually bumps me with the driver's side mirror. And it was my classmate, Wes Colvin. And I'd never been more happy to see anybody, much less Wes Colvin right there. I had one guy that was right in my face. I remember I had to almost put a hockey move on him. I pulled his shirt up over his head from the back and pushed him away from me, and the crowd's just closing in more and more. And I was like, here we go, right? This is going to be bad. And the next thing I remember from that scenario, I'm in the back of a police car, and they're like, hey, do you need a companion officer? And I was like, I don't even know what's going on. And it turns out that guy was dead in the middle of the road. And so they send me home that night, and I get a phone call from one of the supervisors, and he says, I don't know you real well, but you're probably going to be removed from the department, which is not what you want to tell somebody that's in that situation. This is not what I wanted to hear, right? So I spent probably the next 3 days just in limbo of not knowing what's going on, getting weird phone calls from different commanders telling me this and that. I had Sergeant Tim Fox and Sergeant Walt Mobley show up at my house, and they're like, hey, we need your badge and your warrant of appointment and your gun. You're on administrative leave. And I was like, that's not cool, right? Like, this is really, really weird. And so I'm gathering up my stuff for them, and I'm like, well, this is my personal gun. Like, do I have to give you the guys that one? And they were like, no, you can keep that. That's fine. And even that wasn't comforting, and it was very impersonal. Hey, we need your stuff. You're on leave. Sign here. And I've gotten to know those two guys a lot better since then, and I know that was probably not the situation that they wanted to be in either, so I don't hold it against them at all. But yeah, that day was wild because that incident. But an hour before that even happened, my wife had called me and told me that she was pregnant with my first son. So I went from being absolutely elated to being absolutely defeated, and now I'm being told that I'm going to lose my job. They're doing a grand jury referral, so there's a chance that I get arrested and a chance that I go to prison before my son's born, right? So I'm trying to process all that at the same time, and they left me on administrative leave for 10 weeks, which is fairly quick. If you've ever seen anything happen, they don't usually resolve it that quickly, but that 10 weeks was like an eternity. I remember because it was September and I got back to work right around December. But that was 10 weeks of me being basically ostracized, taken away from all the people that I know at work, stuck at home, and I couldn't go anywhere. I wasn't allowed to do anything. Like, when you're on administrative leave, it's not like it's not a vacation, right? It's especially when there's talk of going to prison, right? And losing your job, knowing that you just started a family and you don't have a way to support people right now. So that part was really stressful. I didn't eat for like 3 or 4 days. And once I started to eat, my diet consisted of great value ice cream sandwiches. For whatever reason, I could eat an ice cream sandwich, but I couldn't eat regular food. It really got to me. And so I reached out to my buddy Chris and Todd, and I was like, hey man, I need to get out of the house. Like, I need to do something. And at that point I was living out southeast of Dallas, and they were still living up north. So we met up at a burger place up north and sat down and had a burger, and it was probably the best burger I've ever had in my life. Just sitting with a couple of my guys, letting me just talk and, not asking me all the details, because that's your first day or two after being involved in any event like that. Everybody wants to know all your details, and you really get tired of talking about it. It's not something you want to relive over and over again. But that's kind of the way life goes. People want the details, and if you don't give it to them, they're going to fill in the gaps. So I got a lot of stories about how I was doing Mach 10 and that I cut a guy in half with a squad car, and all sorts of weird stuff went on with that.
How are you doing well, first I'm going to ask, how was the department handling like this type of incident when it comes to addressing mental health?
I don't know that anybody even thought of that. And I remember my deputy chief called me one time, only one time. And during that conversation, they asked me how I was doing, and if I needed anything, and, just the typical questions you're going to ask. They can't give you a whole lot of information. They're just basically checking on you. But they said, hey, hold on real quick. And then the phone got a little bit quiet, and I could hear them ordering food at Sonic, which stuck with me. I'm that important that you're going to go ahead and pull up to Sonic and push the button while you've called me. So that one.
That's leadership.
Yeah. 100%. I'm pretty sure they teach that at Quantico.
Yeah. So the other side, like looking back now, you're armed with much more information on how the mind works and how the brain works and the response to traumatic events. How are you doing at that point as far as home life and then being inside your mind, locked in your house during administrative leave? How are you doing at that point?
Not good. Not good at all, especially in retrospect. At the time, I thought I was handling things okay. I was still young enough to where, hey, let's go to the gym for a couple hours and try to burn all this off and, get our mind off things, which isn't really what you want to do. You need to process things. But I was in such a position of being so deep into it that you can't see the forest for the trees, right? If you're in the forest, it's really hard to see the entire forest. All you see is the tree in front of you. And I was more worried about, am I getting fired? Am I going to prison? What's going to happen to my family right now, that I never actually dealt with what had happened.
How was your family doing?
It was just me and my wife.
Yeah, how was she with all this?
I don't know that I fully ever told her how bad it could have got. She obviously knew I was home, but she was a teacher, so she was working through the day, and then we'd basically see each other or not, and pass in the middle of the night. She's getting home at 3:30. I'm leaving for work at 2:30, and so we hardly ever saw each other except for my days off and her days off, and then it was only a half day because she was working during my days off and I was working during her days off. So that part, and it was intentional. I've intentionally blocked my wife from a lot of the stuff at work, which debatable on whether that's a good thing or not. Talking about the things that you go through is one of the best things you can do for yourself, but you can really burden somebody else with it. And I did not want to do that to my wife. She's just a beautiful soul and a kind person, and I didn't ever want to, dim her light.
Right. Can you talk about the depositions? in that process?
Yeah, so that was really weird. The depositions for that deal, they questioned me for 6 hours. And it was just the weirdest questions, like, hey, how did your day start? And I'm like, I don't know. You show up to the station, and they're like, okay, and then what do you do? Well, we have detail where it's like a roll call. And they're like, okay, well, who called roll that day? And I was like, it could be any one of the sergeants. I don't recall. And they're just asking all these super detailed questions, and I keep telling them, like, man, I don't know. I don't remember. I can't recall. And we never even get to the actual event of what happened. And the attorney gets so frustrated with me. He goes, is there anything you do remember about this day? And I remember just kind of sitting there, and I said, yeah. My wife told me I was going to be a father. And it was dead silent. And my attorney kind of turns and looks at me, and their guys drop their heads. And it was interesting because they said, can we take 5 minutes? And we hadn't really taken a whole lot of breaks. I think we took a lunch break, but it was like a 30-minute lunch break even for that. So when that came out of my mouth, I remember I quivered when I said it because it was still fairly new to me. And they basically stopped asking questions after that. So once they found out, like, I'm not just some renegade cop out trying to run people over in the middle of the street, I think what they were trying to do was get me to go in a certain direction and then use that against me later on. And I really, you don't remember the day-to-day stuff of what you do or who calls detail or any of that stuff. So the crazy questions they would ask, like, I really can't remember. Like, I'm not going on record of saying something that I can't remember. And then when you hit them with, I was going to be a father, I was extremely happy that day. I think it burst their bubble a little bit.
It disarmed them in some ways.
Well, they wanted to use it against you. You couldn't remember all these things. Then all of a sudden you're trying to make us believe that you're really sure about these things.
Right.
And that's pretty clear what they're trying to do.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And they wanted to try to get me with obviously you're going to remember certain things and not others.
Yeah.
So I have a quote here from your bio. It says, the city of Dallas is negligent in the hiring, training, and maintaining of an officer of this caliber. Can you talk about that?
So that was the wording in the lawsuit that they put against me. And these attorneys that do this stuff, they're pretty ruthless. They're looking to get paid. And they say you violated their 1st, 2nd, 4th, 14th, 19th, 23rd Amendment. They go through all of them. They list how you did it. And there's very little factual evidence, and they don't have to be factual. They can say whatever they want, right? Whatever accusations they want to make, they can make, which is really frustrating. But that sentence in itself really stung, and I still have the packet in my safe at the house. I've held on to that for 20-something years now because that's pretty bold language.
It's quite a curse to put on a young officer who's like a year and a half into the department to set someone's trajectory in their career.
Well, the hiring, training, and maintaining of an officer of that caliber, like that's not just like, hey, he's not very good. That's pretty deep, and I don't know. It's something that's always stuck with me.
What is the time frame from depositions to your first day back at work?
I was back at work before the depositions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
No, the depositions were much later.
Okay.
Because they went through the criminal stuff first, and this was all civil.
Yeah.
So the civil depositions is where you go in and they ask you a million questions and really get weird with you.
So what would be the timeline from the beginning of the incident to where everything's finalized and you're done?
That's a great question.
2 years?
I don't even know.
Yeah.
Because
what do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous question.
Well, you get back after 10 weeks. You're already working, and he's right. Civil suits they can last years.
So they have to finish the criminal first,
yeah.
and then they have to go through the civil.
Right.
And I was never even told that the civil case was was finished.
Yeah, some of that you don't know, but still, you're going to work, and then this is still hanging over your head. It affects how you work.
I'll get to that. It gets interesting there. My first day back at work, I'm in the car with Brad Walker, which I could not ask for anything better, right? Brad and I knew each other. We worked together quite a bit. So I'm like, hey, I'm back, right? Like, let's get out of the station and just go somewhere. And they basically said, hey, take it easy today. Drive around, answer a couple calls, do whatever. Well, Brad tells me he has to go pick up a badge from the quartermaster. And that was back when the quartermaster was over off Northwest Highway. So I'm like, perfect. That's going to be at least an hour. All right, let's
Eat
get
up
through
some
this,
of the shift. Yeah.
get through this first hour. Let's just get back into the flow of things. And if you don't think that 10 weeks of being gone from work is long, it's a really long time to be gone from your job, especially when you're still trying to figure it out. You're about a year and a half on. So you want to make sure you still remember everything and that you can still problem solve and do all that, because all those are perishable skills. So we're northbound on 35, and Market Center or Medical District Drive right up there was notorious for the phantom traffic, right? It just would appear. You get past that exit. It wasn't backed up for any reason, and then it's clear again. Well, Brad was in the left lane, and don't know what he turned to look at, but when he looked back at where we were driving, traffic had stopped like it always does. And we make it over, let's say it's a 5-lane highway, we make it over 4 lanes, and we clip a car in that number 2 lane. Like, just, we're almost there, right? We almost made it. We clip a car. So now I'm involved in another vehicle accident. I've been on duty for a total of, an hour and a half, and I've been involved in 2 accidents in my hour and a half of my duty. And so I'm like, this is just crazy, right? Minor accident. Nobody was injured. But still, now Brad, is looking at getting points for driving and all sorts of fun stuff. The other thing is, as soon as we hit that car, traffic just cleared up and there was no traffic around. It's one of those crazy things. But that was weird, right? Now I got 2 traffic accidents. Like, is this something that's just going to be regular? Like, are we in accidents every day? Like, did I just make it lucky for the first year of my career, and this is what being a cop's really like?
You've decided then that you will never drive a squad car again.
I didn't like driving in the first place. I'm not a fan of being places where I don't know exactly where I'm going. I don't travel because of that. Like, I don't like vacations because I don't know where I'm at, and maybe I'm a little bit of a control freak. But I'm enough of a control freak that I will let somebody else drive. I don't mind that. I let my Tesla drive all the time. It's incredible.
Smart.
Yeah. But no, I prefer to do the paperwork. I didn't mind doing paperwork. I did not like driving. I was usually faster than whoever else I was riding with. So I was like, hey, I'll gladly be the bird dog today. You just take me and point me in the right direction.
That was my impression of you. I think the first time I saw you at Southeast, we pulled up and you were riding with Tommy Carroll, and you were just sitting in the passenger, just kind of like, that was your thing, was just to be there. And
well, Tommy was a great dude too.
Yeah.
A classmate, yeah.
Yeah. He retired and ran off to live a good life, man. He was a good dude.
I'm jealous of, he's a great guy. 2 weeks after Brad's incident, can you talk about that?
Yeah, so the culture then was to show up early for your shift, right? We all would show up about 30 minutes early, sit around, talk, chat with the guys that were coming off shift. The second watch guys would pass on whatever was going on. And it was just a time you got to sit back and get ready. You obviously don't walk into being a cop and just turn it on, right? So it gives you a little warm-up time there. So I'm sitting around, and Dale Baugh comes up to me and goes, hey, narcotics needs a traffic stop. And I was like, dude, I just got back to work. Like, I'm not looking to get in any trouble right now, right? Like, last thing I need. And he's like, no. It's fine. It's like a mid-level deal. They'll do everything. You just need a traffic stop. Well, I was riding with Daniel Green that day. And so I go tell Green Jeans, I was like, hey, narcotics wants to help with a traffic stop. Are you cool with that? And he's like, yeah, whatever. So we leave, get the phone numbers from narcotics. I think we might have had one of their radios. I can't remember. But we're trying to find them. This guy keeps going from one place to another, so they're moving locations, telling us to go to a different location. And my phone starts ringing. And I'm like, who's calling me? Like, It's a weird number, but I'm that guy that answers every number regardless. I like to play with scam calls and everything. So I answered the phone, and the guy tells me he's trying to serve me with legal papers. Like, this is how fresh I am back at work. He's still trying to serve me for this suit. And I was like, yeah, cool, man. I'm at Prairie Creek in Lake June, like southeast corner in the squad car. And he's like, all right, I'll be right there. Well, then we get the phone call. Hey, we need to go up north a little bit. Head up to Bruton. So the guy calls me again. He's like, hey, I'm at Prairie Creek in Lake June. There's nobody here. I was like, yeah, we're up at Bruton now. So I basically dodged this guy the entire time, because every time he would get close, they would call us to move someplace else. And so he keeps calling me. I was like, dude, I promise you, I'm not trying to duck you. I'm working on something right now. You got me at work. Like, I'll catch up with you when we catch up. And he's like, perfect, no problem. We end up getting behind the suspect, and we're northbound on Prairie Creek. So we pull him over. He pulls over, and he's driving the like a Chevy Traverse. You know, they were new back then. And Green's driving, so he goes to the driver's side. I go to the passenger side, and I'm looking at this guy, and he's a big boy, probably about 6'2", 6'3", and well over 200 pounds. But his white T-shirt, I can see his heart beating through it. Like, he's nervous. And I haven't experienced that a whole bunch, right? So I see this guy's heart is just racing through his shirt. I'm like, that's really weird. Green was like, I'll be right back with you. So he goes back to the car. And I look down, and he's still got the car in drive. Like, you can see the shifter's still in drive. And I'm like, well, that's weird too. You know, normally they put the car in park. So I was like, I'm just going to tell him to put it in park real quick. So I tap on the window, and he looks over at me. And I go, hey, buddy, go ahead and just put it in park real quick. Well, he decides to put it on the floor instead. So he takes off. I run back to the car. We start telling, it was Ronnie Barden's group. So we're telling Ronnie, hey, this guy's running. You want us to follow him? And he's like, yeah, he's got a pound of meth in the back of that car. Y'all need to catch him. So we're like, all right, well, here we go, right? This is what we live for, car chases and bad guys with drugs. So Green was one of those dudes that could drive the wheels off a car. And we're in a Dodge Intrepid, right? Not the fleetest of vehicles. And so this guy we're smoked, right? Like, if you've ever been on Prairie Creek, it's hills. So you crest a hill, you could see him. We lost the car. So we tell the narcotics guys, hey, we can't, you know, he's way in front of us. Do you want us to keep going? And they're like, yeah, keep going. Like, don't let him get away. So we're going as fast as we can. He's going as fast as he can, but he's running lights and we can't, right? We don't run red lights when we're chasing people. We stop and make sure that the intersections are clear. So we crest the hill, we go down, he crests the hill, we lose him. We crest the next hill, and all you see is smoke. And there's a car accident in the intersection. And so we pull up onto that accident, and driver's side door of his car is open, and there's a guy in the car that he hit. He basically T-boned the other guy, and that guy is dying right in front of you. Like, there's no question about it. He's in the death rolls, and I look at him, and I was like, man, we got an ambulance on the way. And I look over to my left, like kind of shaking my head, and I see the suspect running. And mind you, this was back when we all wore Class A uniforms with Danners, right? The perfect running boot. So I take off after this guy, and I'm running him down. And he was a big boy. He wasn't getting away. I catch up with him, end up getting him on his stomach, and I go to handcuff him. And these are the weird things that stand out to you in these weird situations. Dude has his fingernails painted. We're talking a big old dirty white boy with fingernails painted. And so I go to handcuff him, and I get one cuff on, and I pull his other arm back, and it lifts his shirt up a little bit, and he's wearing a black thong sticking out of his pants. And I'm thinking, what kind of freak deal am I dealing with here? Right? Like,
is this Pat Star? I'm just kidding.
What in the Ronnie Barden's group is going on here?
Right.
You know, this is not what I was looking for. I get him handcuffed, walking back over to the squad car, and I'm just like, man, now this is 3 car accidents in 2 weeks or so, and this guy's dying. Another supervisor shows up at the scene and goes, "Hey, do you want me to contact your attorney?" And I go, "No, I've got his number. Don't worry about it." Like, I call him straight. I called Bob Gorski.
He's already calling me. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I called Gorski and I was like, "You're not going to believe this." And so he shows up and, you know, they didn't put me on any sort of leave on that one, which was really weird. We ended up arresting the guy. They did the whole thing. I ended up going to trial. Now, mind you, my wife's still pregnant while this is going on, right? She just found out she was pregnant 10 weeks before, 12 weeks at that point. So when we go to trial, it was my first kid. I didn't have a babysitter lined up. So I took my kid with me to court, thinking, you know, I'm not testifying on any of this. And it was the funniest thing. They pulled me in to testify, and my son was asleep in the stroller, so I was like, perfect timing, let's get in there. I testify for 45 minutes to an hour, and I come back out, and Ronnie Barton's holding my son, and he's feeding him. And I was like, "What are you doing, man?" And he's like, he woke up a little bit. We had to change his diaper. He's going to be a good one. And I mean, if you knew Ronnie, he was just one of the happiest people just to be wherever he's at. And his group was just a misfit group. You know, he had the guys that would show up to court in running shorts and tank tops.
Yeah.
They had their own vibe to them.
They definitely did. But, man, they were so cool. And I just remembered.
So effective, man.
Oh, yeah, he's a great dude.
I just remember Ronnie just big old Cheshire cat grin looking at me, holding my son as I come off the stand.
That's a good memory.
Well, and the guy got several years. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, he was a bad dude, and their guy.
Did you ask your attorney, can they stack leave? You know, can they do that? I don't know if that's possible.
Yeah, can I serve this consecutively?
Gorski probably has a wing on his house called the Wolverton wing.
Oh man, that was the other thing. That was the other thing that I didn't know back then. Like, who's paying these bills, right? I knew the association would take care of some of that stuff, but I was like, I'm really running a tab up. Like, at a certain point, the city's going to be tired of paying my bills.
So I got to ask you this: were the 3 accidents in 3 months, 2 deaths, baby on the way? Where were you at mentally? Because now this seems like it's sadly becoming your new norm.
Yeah, that was the weird part for me. I was really considering, like, is this what police work is going to be like, and is this something I want to do long term? And I'm really kind of kicking myself around, and I'm like, I really don't have any other skills. Like, I don't want to do anything. Like, I kind of like this police thing that I didn't even think I was ever going to do, right? So I'm trying to rack my brain about what else I can do for a living and how am I going to support a family. My wife and I wanted to have kids, so it wasn't like it was a surprise. Hey, you know, we were wanting to start a family. But, you know, I told you my dad was an electrical contractor. He owned his own business, but he had sold it. He sold out of his business, so I was like, well, I can't get into the family business, you know. What else am I going to do? And I basically just was like, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. You know, we're just going to have to figure this out, and it doesn't seem like anybody else is going through all this stuff, so maybe it's just me. Maybe I got a dark cloud around me right now, and I need to get out from underneath it.
Rocky Stevens said something to you that kind of stuck with you, and he kind of gave you a different perspective of life, DPD life, and what direction you should go.
Yeah, Rocky had a way with words, and he stopped me, and it was probably written all over my face. You know, I didn't hide it very well that I was getting beat up, and
he's great at reading people.
He pulled me aside and he said, "Listen, man, the stuff you're going through, like, things like that will either make you or break you." He said, "But the good thing is you get to decide which one it is. So if you want it to, it'll break you and it'll tear you all the way down, and you'll never recover from this. Or you can use this and decide, you know, I'm not going to let this beat me, and I'm gonna use this to benefit me."
What did you do? You're at a crossroads there, right?
Yeah, no, I had to go back to even being younger and being involved in athletics and everything. I was never the best at anything, right? I was always a role player. I knew my role, but I knew I wasn't as skilled as some people. But I could make up for skill with hustle, and I could work harder than most people. And so that's kind of what I decided. I was like, I'm gonna work harder. You know, I'm gonna try harder, and I've always studied other people. Like, if I know that somebody's better than me at something, I want to watch how they do it. And there was a ton of guys that were better than me at Southeast, so I started watching different people and figuring out who did what and how they did things, and I would adopt their tactics and some of their phrases, just little things like that. And again, effort is one of those things that can make up for a lot of skill.
But you had an inner drive to want to be the best.
And that's something I've always wanted to be, and it's weird because I'm never the best at any of the stuff that I'm doing. And if there's one thing I am the best at, it's probably surrounding myself with people that are better than me. And from the time I was little, and the group of friends I had throughout high school, like, they're all better than me. You know, they're great dudes. They were better at sports. They're smarter. The same thing here. And I don't think I contribute any of my success on the police department to the people who are around me, because that's how I made myself better, was just surrounding myself with better people.
No, there's something to that, of having good people around you that can pick you up, but it also becomes infectious of how you operate.
For sure.
I want to get into how incidents like this can haunt officers, especially young officers, and what they want to do for the rest of their career as far as applying places.
So I was one of those guys that thought that you should really earn your spot. You know, you should be a great police officer before you try to go somewhere. So I didn't apply for a whole lot of places. That, and I knew if I went to an interview, I had to explain everything that was on my internal affairs resume, which it was mostly administrative inquiries, right? There was no investigation into misconduct, but still, it was something that it was weird. I didn't really want to explain. So I applied to deployment a handful of times, and I applied to the gang unit. That's the type of work I kind of wanted to do. And the gang unit interview was probably the worst interview I've ever been in. I remember sitting there, and the guys conducting the interview, one of them was digging in his cell phone the whole time, which we didn't even have, smartphones at that point, I don't think. So I don't know what he was doing. But it was like they didn't listen to anything I said. Nobody was writing anything down. They just kind of asked the questions and then turned themselves off. And I remember I got an inter-office envelope to, I think it was either Keith or Kevin Wolverton or Wilverton, something. Not even my real name, right? Thanking me for interviewing, but telling me I didn't get the spot. And I was like, man, that's really kind of shitty. To get a letter, like, you couldn't even look in the database to find out what my actual name was.
So impersonal. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've used that as a lesson. Anytime I interview people, I call people and tell them that they didn't get the spot, and it's uncomfortable sometimes.
Do you offer any advice on how they could have done better?
If they ask for it.
Okay.
I'm not just going to tell you, like, hey, you need to work on this, right? I call them and say, hey, I really appreciate you going. This is who we selected, and you weren't selected this time, but if they did a good job, I'll tell them, hey, apply again. If they didn't, I'd leave that part out.
Well, it doesn't take talent to be a professional. It's effort, right? And so I think that's a big part of it. People, equate like, well, they didn't get this because of that or whatever. And it's like, look, how you handle that has nothing to do with talent. Be a pro kind of thing. So
effort is like I said, it's the one thing I always knew I could control. I wasn't a great shooter in basketball, but if there was a loose ball, I bet you I was going to get to it, or I was going to come up with floor burns.
You applied for NPOs, and I was at Southeast time, and I could tell you how I used the NPOs as far as gathering intel. How did that go? I mean, you applied for these other spots, and sadly, the way it goes, it sounds like they may have had their mind made up before you even walked in the door.
And I don't blame people for that. I think that's more natural than you would think it is.
Oh, yeah.
If you know somebody and they're a good worker and you know how they work and you want to supervise that type of person, you're not going to take a chance on somebody based off an interview. For the most part, you're going to take the people and the people that are going to do what you already expect.
Because there's a lot of scrubs that can go in there and wow you for 15 minutes.
For sure. So I didn't really hold any resentment for that part, but the impersonal part was a little bit weird to me. But the MPO thing, I basically was asked to apply for that one.
By who?
The people that were over there at that point, I don't remember who.
Victor Lucas was over there, wasn't he?
I think Lucas and
Yeah.
Garza were there. Sheila Zimmerman was there, and
Oh, that's right, Zimmerman.
Mm-hmm.
and they had, there wasn't a whole lot of responsibility at that point. We picked up a lot of responsibility in the time that I was there, but we did 311 complaints, and we went to crime watch meetings, especially on the evenings group. Like, you had to go to the crime watch meetings, and you would basically take your stats with you, and you would tell the people, hey, you've got a problem over here with car burglaries. And I had the 50s at Southeast, which went anywhere south of Elam, from behind the station all the way out to the Deep Grove. So I kind of became the king of the trailer parks, which was weird because...
That's going to be the title of this episode.
Yeah, I appreciate that. The trailer parks were run mostly by Hispanic women as the management. And so a lot of the people who lived in those trailer parks and those communities out there spoke Spanish. And I didn't speak Spanish. I understand it, but I don't speak it because I really sound uneducated when I do. So I would take Lucas or Garza with me, and they were great about it, man. They really helped me out with that stuff. And then at a certain point, they fell off, and the apartment managers knew that they could speak Spanish, and they would translate back and forth. But when you work as a patrol officer, especially if you're out there trying to initiate your own activity, you don't deal with the best parts of society, right? You're basically surrounding yourself with criminals and the criminal element. But when you go to crime watch meetings, those guys aren't there. Their victims are there. And it shows you that there are still good people, so you might have a jaded look on the entire city of Dallas if you've never been to a crime watch meeting and seen that these people are like, hey, really, we want you to come by. I probably gained 15 pounds as an MPO just because they would feed us at every crime watch group. Like, they would be offended if you didn't eat one of their pastries. So I remember I tried to put it off for the longest time, and there was something weird about eating in uniform. You don't want to you don't want to be caught grabbing Rice Krispie treats.
Or eating a donut.
But I went to, there was a crime watch group over at Riley Church, and there was a sweet old lady there, and she would bring these Rice Krispies and peanut butter, like a weird little dessert thing she made, and she forced me to eat it. Like, for about a month or a half, I told her, like, I'm good, thank you. And then finally she was like, well, I made a bunch of these. Will you take them back to the station? And so I ate one, and I made a big deal of it. I was like, oh man, these are fantastic. And it was good, but it didn't blow my mind, right? But I made it a point to tell her, these are really good. I really appreciate it. And the next week she brought 2 trays. And she was like, there's one for you and there's one for the station, right? Like, because nobody would eat them at the crime watch group. They were all senior citizens. So she would make me take it back to the station. And so every week I was taking, 2 trays back because I had mentioned that, oh man, these are so good. But those were the sweet people you would come across. And I met a lot of people that were just really hardworking, good people that lived in that community that you typically wouldn't come across if you were just a normal police officer.
But they wanted to give you, they wanted to live in peace.
True. And they knew everything, right?
Right.
They lived there 24 hours a day where you work there 8 hours a day. So when they told you, hey, this guy across the street from me at this address is selling drugs, you pretty much could take it as the gospel. He was doing something wrong. You pass that information along. I know before I was there, we got a lot of information from some of the MPOs, and it turned out correct almost all the time. So it's a very valuable resource.
I want to get into you promoting to sergeant. Can you talk about that?
Because I didn't get selected for really any of the positions that I wanted, I kind of thought maybe, am I blackballed? Have I got myself in so much trouble that nobody's going to take a chance on me? Southeast was kind of a black hole at that time, and once you were there, you didn't get to leave. There wasn't a whole lot of people leaving Southeast, and that changed, and you saw a lot of people fly out of Southeast. A lot of really good detectives came out of Southeast once people started letting them out. But I decided, I'm going to go ahead and just promote. Let's try one more test. Let's take a test and see what happens. And I didn't overly commit to the studying, but I got myself in a little bit of trouble, and I spent 11 and a half months at communications. And I took that opportunity to really learn general orders, right? Like, where did I screw up? What can I do right? Like, what does this actually say? And you'll find that your troublemakers are usually some of your most knowledgeable guys when it comes to general orders. If you have a guy that really knows the ins and outs of general orders, that's because he's trying to use them to his advantage. You can respect the hustle, right? It's a fun part of that. But I studied a little bit of general orders while I was down at communications, and then they announced the test, and I had been told I couldn't go back to the watch I was on, so I went to second watch, and second watch doesn't have a lot going on. So take a park mark out, check out the park real quick, make sure everybody's fine, then spend another 10 minutes reading, your SOPs. Just study a little bit. So I spent some time studying. Then I took the test and did really well, way better than I thought I was going to do. And so then they had the assessment center for sergeants, and I was like, this is weird. Like, I don't know what an assessment center is. I've never seen one. I've never been to one. And I got an email from Thomas Rockhill saying, here's assessment center training. It's $500. And I was like, that's a lot of money. $500 to go to a course. Like, I think it's a 2 or 3 day course. And I was like, eh. And then I talked to somebody, and they said, in your first month, you'll make over $500 if you get the promotion. Like, it'll pay for itself. So I was like, all right, let me try this deal. And I went to the course, and I realized that course put me at ease. Like, I knew what was coming, and knowing what you're walking into. If you didn't know and you walked in the assessment center and they hit you with everything cold, like the different interviews and the different questions they're going to ask and the inbox exercise and all the stuff, like if you've never done it before, it's pretty difficult. But the ones that they gave us to practice were at least twice as hard as the ones that they actually did. So when I went into the assessment center, especially after the first day and realizing I'm way more prepared than I should have been and way more prepared than anybody who didn't take this, the confidence there was overwhelming. I mean, I really felt like I did well, which strangely enough, the things I thought I did well on, they said I did poorly on, and the things I thought I did poorly on, they said I did well on. But assessment centers they're not very objective. You have two people that evaluate you, and those same two people might not evaluate the person next to you, but they'll evaluate somebody else. So as far as just being consistent, it's not really there. But I tell everybody, if you want to go to an assessment, come talk to me first, and I'll tell you it's basically just playing make-believe, right? Pretend you're a sergeant and go in there and act like you're the sergeant. Like, for every scenario, you're the sergeant. So just do whatever you want. And there's really no limits because they're bringing in assessors from other cities. So they don't know. Dallas has tanks and 16 drone planes that you can fly, right? So if you have a protest, what are you going to do? You're going to bring in every resource that you've ever heard of. Like, we have a camel brigade. We're going to use the marching camels to come through. And you can use whatever you want. And they like the creativity. So just don't limit you to what you actually know. Use whatever you can and play make-believe.
Well, Walt Mobley, he had a good assessment of the way we promote people. It has nothing to do with your body of work. He said you take a test, then you get interviewed by a couple of people that don't know you, never see you again. They don't know your entire body of work or who you really are as a person.
For sure.
And that's the way that's just the way civil service promotes. And it doesn't always promote the best leaders, or the most knowledgeable leaders.
Walt has been very influential in my career, and I don't know that he understands it. But he was a sergeant when I first came on, and I watched him and his leadership style a lot. And I really appreciated just being able to talk with him. And when I went up to SWAT, he was in the equipment room at that point. And, man, it was really nice to have a friendly face there that I knew and that I could talk to and bounce things off of.
Kent, you dazzled the assessment center, and you go to communications. You touched on that's being just a shit assignment, and not many people go there, especially with your background of the type of work that you like to do and the kind of person you are. You decided to apply for a pretty big unit. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so as a sergeant, I got sent to South Central first, and while I was there, I was working fourth watch, which was like 7 at night to 5 in the morning, and they had a group that was the their night CRT, which worked from 8 at night to 4 in the morning, but they worked 5 days a week where I was only working 4. So I always knew I liked the more proactive stuff, so I kind of hung out with those guys a little bit, and I guess by default nobody else really wanted that spot, so they put me over the CRT guys for a while, and I really liked the small group stuff. But I read an article in the Shield, the DPA's newsletter, and it was written by Chris Webb, and it was talking about how, SWAT's not horrible, we're not on call that much, and, it's a fun job. And I remember it was a tale of lies spun by Chris Webb, and
Writers live there. Yeah.
I swallowed that hook all the way down to my guts. And so I started thinking about it a little bit, and I was like, maybe I will try this. I never had any interest in doing it before. I realized I was completely outclassed by those guys. They were all just bigger and stronger and faster. I mean, just mountains of men, that would just run circles around me. So I was like, I'm not interested in that, especially not as a senior corporal. But then as a sergeant, I was talking to my son one night, and he played some youth football and was not real great at it. And I knew he could do better, but we also played baseball, and he was really good at baseball, but he didn't want to play football this next season coming up. And I was like, hey, buddy, I think you should give football a try again. Maybe we'll try a different position. He was a little bit on the heavy side at a certain point, so they put the X on his helmet, and they wouldn't let him, play off the line. So he really hated football for being a lineman. And I said, we'll get your weight under control, and we'll get you a different spot. I just want you to try it, right? Maybe try something different. He was like, no, I just want to play baseball. So I kept pushing on him. I was like, you really need to try something different. And he might have been 8 or 9 years old at that point, and he hit me with, well, you never try anything different. And I was like, no, I mean, it's a good point. I said, I'll tell you what, next time a position comes around with the SWAT team, I'll apply for it. And his eyes kind of lit up, and he agreed to play football. So the position comes open in SWAT, and I was like, well, I told my son I was going to do it. If there's somebody you're going to lie to, it's not going to be your son. So I put my name in, and I contacted Lieutenant Younger, and I was working an off-duty job for him at that time, building 635. And I get the email back saying, this is the date of the testing, the interview, and all that stuff. And I was like, okay, that's right in the middle of my family vacation. And I didn't take a whole lot of family vacation, so I was like, I'm not gonna cancel my vacation, and I'm definitely not gonna try to hold up the entire SWAT team from doing what they need to do. If they're short people, they need to get it done. I'll apply next time. And so I draft up this email to Lieutenant Younger, and it basically says all that, right? I've got a family vacation planned. I appreciate your time. I'll apply again soon. And all I get is thanks, which if you know Paul Younger, that's about what you're going to get from him, right? And so I'm a little like, here we go again, right? Like, thanks. That's what I get. So I come back from vacation.
It said, thanks, Kelvin.
Yeah, exactly. I come back, and actually Paul Younger is one of those guys that really pronounces the T on my name. Kent. Him and Mark Lang, both of them. But anyway, I come back from vacation, and I see that they took Eric Roman for the spot. And I was like, that's interesting. Maybe I'll try again. And another position comes open. Jerry Girdler apparently decided he'd had enough of living that SWAT life and wanted to go over to narcotics, so he transferred over there, and they had a vacant spot. So I put my name in again, not knowing what I was getting myself into. I show up for a PT test, which wasn't horribly difficult. The 1.5 mile run's the hardest part for me, and 1.5 miles is really not that hard. I didn't break any land speed records, but I passed it. And then we go to the interview, and the interview is basically a formality. They ask you a bunch of questions that they ask in every interview, but now there's an actual assessment. And you're going to go to a school for a week, and they don't tell you what that entails either. But it was probably one of the more physically demanding things that I've done in my police career, and probably my entire life, to be honest. I remember I made it to about Wednesday before I told my wife, like, if this doesn't work out, I'm never doing this again. Like, it is not going to happen. I'm not going to be that guy that tries out 18 times. Like, this hurts. And the biggest part was on the first day, the very first thing they have you do is show up in your PT gear, and they put you through a CrossFit style workout that just destroys. Like, you can't be ready for that. I don't know anybody who walks into that and walks out of it being like, okay, that was pretty good. Good workout. Everybody, yay. So my core was absolutely destroyed. I mean, it was power cleans and burpee box jumps and wall ball sit-ups and sledgehammers and rowing. And it basically took like 50-something minutes of rotating every 2 minutes into a different exercise. So when I woke up on Tuesday morning, I could barely move. My core was destroyed. And I was like, oh, my God, what did I get myself into? And day 2, the PT is, well, number one, it was freezing. It was a January that I tried out, and it was a really cold January. So you show up in your PT gear, which is shorts and a T-shirt, and it's cold, and you run all the way to a mile there, and you run a mile back if you lose, and really everybody runs back because that's just part of the game we play. But then the next day, I didn't bother to check the weather at all, right? So I didn't take any cold weather gear. And we're out on the range, and I think it's a pistol day first, or maybe it's a rifle day first. I can't remember anymore. It's been way too long, and I try to block that stuff out. But I'm freezing, and I'm trying to shoot. I'm shivering. I'm exhausted. Like, I'm just beat down. And somehow I'm hitting targets, or maybe I'm missing targets. I don't know what was going on. What I do remember is on the rifle day, my rifle kept failing. So we'd be 25 yards away taking rifle shots on the move, and I'd had to transition to a SIG with the longest trigger pull, taking, walking pistol shots at 25 yards. It seems a little unrealistic for me, but I managed to get through it, and I realized it was coming over and over again, so it just was one of those things that happened, and we worked through it. But yeah, the second day of the PT, though, is the obstacle course, and every one of those obstacles requires you to engage your core. Absolutely. Like, you cannot do it without engaging your core. And I'm going through there just dying, like literally dying. And the Irish table is my nemesis out there. And if you don't have your core strength and you're trying to pull yourself up and over a log that's 7 feet in the air, you're not doing it. And I couldn't do it. And I was just like, I was so angry because I could do every other obstacle. It was painful and difficult, but it wasn't impossible. And I'm sitting there, and I couldn't get over that. And so the penalty is you do a couple burpees, then you get to keep moving. So I'm just livid that I had to do burpees on this obstacle course. And I go through the rest of the day, and I'm just getting my ass kicked, whatever stuff they're making me do that I'm completely not ready for. And so I go back at the end of the day, and I look at the Irish table, and I was like, I fucking hate this thing. And so I jump up there and pull myself over. I don't know that anybody else was even there. I had to do it. I had to know that I could do it because the next day we're doing it again. But when I got home on Wednesday night after doing the obstacle course twice, I looked like I'd been to Singapore and stole something. Like, I had little bruises from where I was hugging that Irish table, the 2x6 or whatever it is up there. And it went from wrist to wrist all the way through my arms, all the way across my chest. And then my legs were just bruised on the inside from trying to hang on to whatever other logs or whatever. And my wife walks in on me when I'm getting out of the shower, and she goes, "What have you been doing?"
She thought you were like Batman going and Bruce Wayne getting the hell beat out of him.
Bruce Wayne was more like it. I was just defeated, and that I was in an ice bath because Rose was like, "Hey, you might want to consider an ice bath if you're really sore." And I was like, "I'm definitely sore." On top of that, every day starts with PT, and then they put you in a classroom, and they're teaching you what you're going to do for the next part.
Who is teaching this? Like, were you all involved with this, Matt or Danny?
Yeah, every squad puts on a day of PT.
Okay.
So, but then they go and they teach you stuff, right? So you're learning about CN and CS gas and the difference between them, and there's tests for all this stuff. So you have to pay attention to everything that's going on in these courses that are being taught by the subject matter experts in the SWAT team. So you're getting some top-notch training, but you're exhausted physically. You're pretty tired mentally after being in there for an hour or so you're trying to pay attention. And then they want you to go out and apply what you just learned, right? So it's a beautiful setup that they have because it's the only way you can really mimic what you might actually encounter, right? Can you do things while you're tired? Can you do things when your focus should be tested, right? And Wednesday I came home and told my wife, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, if I don't make it, I'm done. Like, sorry, I tried. Ends up I make it, and I get put in probably the best situation I could have been in as a brand new sergeant over in SWAT with zero SWAT experience. I had the most senior squad by far, and they were just absolute professionals. I didn't know enough then. Like, looking back on it, I can see it. Like, they were exactly what I needed. You know, I had Todd Wellhouse, I had Joe Guzman, I had Todd Stratman, Kelly White, Alfredo Bedoy, Larry Gordon, Mark Lang, Brandon Berry, and Adam Giorgizzo. So out of the 9 guys that I had, 7 of them were senior to me on the department. Not just in SWAT, but on the department. They had been here longer than me. So it's really unique where you're now their supervisor. Not just guys that have been on the department longer than you, but they know so much more than you, and they're so much better than you are. And somehow they did a really good job of letting me think that I was kind of running things, right? But Todd Wellhouse retired in 6 months of me being there. So he's gone. And now I'm looking to Todd Stratman to run everything. And Stratman is, like, if you go to bed at night and fall asleep and have a SWAT dream, Todd Stratman's one of those guys that you're going to dream about. Like, he's a professional. He doesn't overly talk things. If you want to see how to do it, you can watch what he does, but he's really not going to explain it to you more than once. And he's not a man of many words, but when he does, it's a knowledge bomb like you wouldn't believe. And you're just like, holy cow, like, how did he just do that in 6 words? You know, it would have taken me 300 to try to even get it out.
Who was the ASL over there?
Wellhouse was, and when he left, it took me a while because I didn't know anybody. I'm there for 6 months. I'm still trying to figure out what's going on. By the way, for 6 months, I wasn't allowed to do anything SWAT related. I had to basically sit with the lieutenant and watch everybody else work. And I'm going through all sorts of classes. I'm trying to learn everything, drinking from a fire hose, holding, another sergeant's pocket on a warrant to where I can follow behind them, and they won't let me go in the house until everything's done. And I was like, man, this is really, like, intense. But I had such a group of professionals. Like, I didn't have to do anything. My job as a sergeant there was basically just to watch and learn. And I'm asking everybody, like, hey, who's my next ASL? Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know these guys well enough. And everybody was like, it's Stratman. Duh. Like, why are you asking? And so I had several talks with Stratman, and I don't know that maybe he just didn't see himself in that role. But he took it and he killed it, and one of my biggest regrets in my time there was when Stratman started having injuries. The PT test knocked him out one time. His shoulder was bad for a couple months. And I was still so new that I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need somebody here to tell me what to do. And I had several guys that would fill that role for me, but I was looking for a central point. And so I'd talked with Stratman. I was constantly worried he was going to leave me because he'd been there forever already. And we ended up talking about him going down to the equipment room. And as soon as that came to reality, I realized, like, I just lost more knowledge than I'll ever have. And a guy that could have been right next to me. And it was like, man, if you could go back and redo things, that would be one of the things that I would definitely try to, give him more time to mend. I was constantly pushing him, like, hey, we need to take a PT test. I need you back operational. I need this. I need that. And I feel like I kind of pushed him too much sometimes, and Todd wasn't going to allow me to push him around. Like, I don't think that I was able to make him do anything that he didn't want to do. But the constant nagging on him, like, I really wish I had given him more time to fix himself.
Can you talk about the first warrant that you ran?
I didn't run it. This was a narcotics deal, and it's actually my buddy who was the first guy to come up here. It was his warrant. And they asked me, hey, can you drive an APC? And I was like, yeah. Does it have wheels and a steering wheel? Like, I can drive. Like, sure. And so I remember the 40s and the 10s were on my APC for some reason, which is really weird because those two don't mix. And they said, hey, we want you to take the curb up into the yard. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Just slow down a little bit, hit the curb, and keep going. And one of the guys was like, I'll tell you when to turn into the yard. And I'm like, okay, yeah, easy enough, right? I drive. He tells me when to turn. I take a slow turn, get up into the yard. It was on Stoneman over in South Dallas. And the curbs there are like 9 to 12 inches. They're not the little 4-inch curb that you're used to. And so I'm waiting for him to give me the go-ahead to turn. And we're getting to the house. And he gives me like a half turn, don't turn thing. And one of the tires catches that 12-inch curb. And all you hear is all the air coming out of the tire. And everyone's jumping off, looking back at the APC like, what in the world is that noise? And I put the APC on flat over on Stoneman. And you don't jack those up and just change a tire real quick. So
you can put fix a flat in.
Yeah. So after the warrant, I'm sitting there in the middle of the street, and I'm on the phone with Central Garage, being like, hey, do you guys got like a medium duty wrecker you can come get this thing with? And everybody left me. I know we talked earlier about leaving people at warrants. Everybody left me in South Dallas with the APC by myself and waiting on a wrecker to show up. The wrecker shows up, hooks it up, and I jump in the wrecker and ride it all the way back to Central. And I was just like, what a debut, right? Like, what an idiot.
Nailed it.
And what's funny is my buddy from Narcotics actually took a picture and sent it to me of me standing in the middle of the street just looking at the APC, like just
failed smile,
not even smiling, right? And it's from so far away, little sniper shot, but you could just tell that I was defeated, like head down, and it was a great way to start your career over there for sure.
Well, you're working. You mentioned basically you're supervising titans of the department.
They're not normal people over there. And I mean that in the best way possible. Like they're superhumans. They'll complain every once in a while, but for the most part, if you're asking them to do their job and do anything SWAT work like, they do it. They'll do it until they fall apart or they fall off. Like they're like snow dogs is what I tell everybody. Like they will literally run themselves to death trying to do what they're supposed to do. And so that your biggest thing is putting the brakes on those guys. And you don't have to ask them to do anything. That group that I just mentioned, when I first got there, I had to go to a meeting for like the Secret Service. And I came back and I was like, hey, president's coming to town or something. I don't even remember what it was. And without me even telling them a day or a time or anything, they already knew, hey, we need to figure out who's going in what car. We need to figure out routes. We need to do this, that. They were on top of all of it without having to be told. And that was such a relief for me because I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Was it a surprise? Just as far as seeing, I mean, we always hear about how, amazing our SWAT is and that level. But once you actually get there and you see it front row seat.
It's not a surprise. It's more...
it's unexpected.
It's the feeling you have about not having to do, like, things are being solved and taken care of. It's a different feeling. You're not used to having that feeling. Everywhere you go and work on this department, everything's always put on you. And then to be with other people in the room who all of a sudden just instantly spring to action or do something, that I think that's what the
you don't have
difference
to ask them to do their job. They already know what their job is, and they do it better than you could do it, better than you would imagine. And it's not a surprise so much, but when you figure out, like, these guys break things, right? They are absolutely the knuckle draggers that you think they are. But if you've ever seen, like, a bunch of monkeys that find a coconut and they're trying to figure out how to get the coconut open, if you find a problem over in SWAT and you take it over there to them, they dissect it completely. Like if you have 2 days where you just don't really have anything planned, go ask Matt Renfro about the construction of a door. And he's going to list about 6 different door types, and he can tell you the construction of doors. Like does anybody outside of SWAT know what a fairing strip is?
Furring, yes. Furring strip,
see,
yeah.
Sure. Furring strip. It's the part of the door that basically holds a hollow core door together. These guys are so knowledgeable about it. And if I just laid down a bunch of tools and said, open that door with whatever you want.
Yeah.
Well, normal people are going to grab a slam and they're going to try to slam a door. But these guys are going to be like, I can do it better with this, right? What kind of door is that? What kind of lock is it? What's the frame? When was this actually built? What was the code back then? I'm serious. You have guys that understand the windows that were required in certain buildings in downtown Dallas during different time periods. And you're just like, how do you know that stuff? And it's institutional knowledge that is passed down, and it blows your mind because everybody thinks that these guys are just knuckleheads, right? They're just big, strong guys that break stuff, but they break stuff in the most effective way possible. And they've practiced it, they've studied it, they've told each other about it, they've bounced ideas back and forth, and it's really interesting to be in that arena with them and to watch them actually dissect those things. It's intimidating for sure. Like I just going there and trying to supervise those guys, knowing that they are better than you in every facet of life. And now, like, you're in charge though. Hey, by the way, don't screw this up, right? And I mentioned it earlier, like every squad within SWAT, you've got 4 of them. They all have a different personality, right? And everything is a competition. If you're at a training day where it's a unit training day, everyone's competing. Whether it's a competition or not, we're competing, right? And the different personalities conflict. So now you're competing against each other, and you've got like the best here and the best here and the best here and the best here. And it's constant competition, and there's animosity between the groups because you do it a different way than we do it, and our way is better, and our way is better, and it goes back and forth. And then operationally, it's like the Olympics, and now you have the dream team. And you have the best of every part of those guys at your disposal, and you're just Phil Jackson. And you're trying to put those guys in position, and it's so just fascinating. They could hate each other 15 minutes ago. But then if an operation comes, all that's gone. We're absolute professionals. We're doing things right here, right now. One thought process, and you're just like, I don't understand how they do this stuff.
It's like going from playing checkers to chess and moving the pieces around.
Yeah, but high level chess.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
No, I had a healthy respect for the guys before I got there because I just knew they were better than me, but you don't know how much better and how much smarter and the actual work they put into their craft. Like, I told every one of my new guys when they got their specialty assignment, I said, I want you to be the subject matter expert for whatever it is. Like, if people have questions on how this 40 millimeter works and you're a 40 millimeter guy, they should come to you first. Like, that's what I want you to learn, and I want you to absorb everything about it. And they did it, and I never had to say it twice. Like, guys just understood, like, I want to be that guy that has the answers to the questions.
Speaking of that, I want Danny and Matt's perspective on how you were as a supervisor.
I like how Matt
There's a big freaking grin right
first.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing, and it stood out, was Kent's intention for being a professional, and also attention to detail. Still, one of my earliest memories is I was new in SWAT and on his squad, and we're having some squad meeting. And like he said, all these guys are very senior, and Kent's questioning on something that we had decided to do and how we were going to go about it. And he's kind of trying to get it broken down, saying, well, why? What are the reasons? And they were saying, well, because we do this and we do this. Yeah, I understand, but why are we doing this instead of this way? Well, because we don't do it that way. And finally he's like, well, why are we doing it this way? And someone said, because that's the way we've always done it. And I remember him grabbing his steno pad off the table and just slamming it down abruptly and just yelling, I can't fucking stand that answer. Don't ever give me that answer again. And you talk about a guy who, like he was saying, everyone else is senior to him on that squad, right? Everyone else has more knowledge. They are the SWAT guys. They've been there longer. Here's this rookie sergeant. And I thought, okay. We have a supervisor who's willing to step in no matter what rank or tenure on the department and try and take control of a group of guys who are type A personalities and strong-headed or stubborn at times, and willing to kind of see through all this and want to do things better, do things right. It all came from a place of being a professional and having good intentions.
Coming over as a supervisor to the unit you've never been there is much different than coming over as an operator, in the sense, as I come over as a brand new guy, I only have one responsibility, myself. and you're just like, I'm trying to take care of myself. You're learning the job. Whereas coming over as a supervisor, you still have to do that to some degree because you have to show the ability to do this job. You have to go through the same schools and do it at a certain kind of level. But at the same time, you're in charge, basically, whether you like it or not. You're like, I'm in charge of people doing a job that I have no idea what they're doing or how they do it. And I'm never going to know, or I'm not going to know for a long time. And I've said this to many of the supervisors that come over, even though, because Kent wasn't my supervisor. He was a supervisor of the squad that's my sister squad in my unit. So you work with him all the time, but he's not your direct supervisor. But, there's supervisors, sergeants are off, you show up on operation, and he just ends up on the same side of the house that you are. That happens all the time on operations. So it's not like you're not working with them. So even though he was never my direct supervisor, you work with them, with all the sergeants at one time or another, especially the sergeant of the squad that's your sister squad. And at that time, my squad was in flux quite a bit with supervisors. And so we went months and months without a sergeant over my squad at all. So by default, now Kent becomes our supervisor, as far as payroll and doing different things that the supervisors have to do. So you have to work with them regardless. And so you, as a new guy, you realize and you remember all the things you got to learn. If you don't recognize as a guy that's been there for a few years that a new person's coming over as a sergeant, that's even harder in its own sense because they don't have to come up maybe to the mastery level that you do, but they have to be able to do things that it's just a different perspective and an outlook. So it's not easy. And so I appreciated Kent's, willingness to come in there and learn and to ask questions. Because he asked a lot of questions. He asked not just people in his squad. I had Tim there when you first came over. And, again, nobody better to ask about how to do this job than Tim Houston. And I equate a lot of our successes and mine, too, to that dude. Because I asked him tons of questions. I mean, I've said this before. I'm so fortunate to have that. And Todd was great. Freaky was a great dude, too. We had a lot of guys over there. Todd, I knew Todd from patrol. Todd's still there. Strapman's a great dude. So you had a lot of luxury of having guys there, but at the same time, they're not going to come over there and just make you learn it. You're going to have to ask, and you're going to have to put the effort into it. And so he did that. And Ken and I had our own conversations too, before ops, during ops, and sometimes after the op. We had a discussion. So it was great. And so I appreciated the effort, and like Danny alluded to, the level of professionalism. You can come over there as a new sergeant, or I say new sergeant, a new sergeant in SWAT, and just kind of hang out and just kind of make it. But he didn't do that. So that's a good thing, and I appreciate that.
It was fun to see over the years that Kent kind of became the sergeant for the team. We had some sergeants come in and out, and so, of course, he's gaining more experience and obviously tenure and in the team. But also, some of these sergeants can kind of be unapproachable if you're in a different squad. And Kent was always someone I think the whole team felt like they could approach because he'd actually listen to you, and they knew he was going to take things serious. And he always put the team and the mission first and trying to be a professional. It was fun to see through the years that he was kind of like the sergeant. To me, that stood out as the ringleader of the sergeants over time, and he was looked at that way as being the guy who was always organized and had great attention to detail. And if you needed someone to go to the Secret Service meeting or whatever, that was your guy to represent the team.
Well, I think even people from other squads recognize, like, hey, he's a professional. Like, if he goes to the meeting or he does this and represents us, he'll do a good job. And what he comes back and tells us, we 100% trust it. And that's you can't BS your way over there. People they don't listen very well anyway, let alone so you have to earn that. And there's nothing, you don't issue that out to you. So as a new sergeant coming over there, you have to put the time and effort into, and you have to be accountable and have to be a professional, and it'll pay dividends later, but you got to earn it. So, and he definitely did that. There's no doubt.
Well, I hate the fact that Danny brings up one of the 2 times that I lost my cool in front of everybody as one of his most memorable deals there.
I knew you were a rookie sergeant there too, right? And it's because I'm a rookie. I'm feeling it. I know what it's like, and I'm in the squad with very senior guys, and so there is this. Who's really running the ship, right? Who's really taking control? And then I just remember you putting your foot down right then and being able to, with a bunch of senior guys in the room, and say, no, like, this is my squad. We need to figure this out, and I need better answers than that. And I thought, okay, well, he'll make it over here.
Well, you put your foot down at some point when Danny applied as well, right?
Yeah, that one wasn't too hard. and I think everybody knew it. There was a little bit of consternation about picking Kennedy, not based on his performance during the school, but based on his reputation before, which I thought was unfair. If we're going to evaluate people and they come out and perform in a school, that's what we're evaluating, right? If we wanted to do a background check on everybody, we'd do that. And there was a little back and forth between some of us, and I was like, okay, well, like, I'm the one that's typing the memo, and I'm saying he's on it, so who's next? And I didn't get a lot of pushback. You know, there wasn't quite what I was expecting was a lot more. But I guess maybe the guys respected the rank at that point. And I tried to not ever use rank as a deciding factor, because I think that's a cheap way out. If you're wrong as a sergeant, you're still wrong, right? You're just wrong as a sergeant. So if you can't validate what you're trying to say, your rank really doesn't matter. So I tried to stay away from that. And I remember being embarrassed walking away from that, because I did blow my top on that, and I was pretty pissed off about it. But I've never accepted this is the way we always do it as a reason for why we should continue to do it. And it just sounds stupid to me, right? Like,
No, I agree.
you know, there's countries that still wipe their butts with their hands and shake hands with the other, and I think that's wrong. But that's the way they always do it.
I don't know what you are talking about. I'm sure they could have given you legitimate reasons why. That was just the easy answer to them trying to, to gloss over it, I'm sure.
That's probably a part of it. I can't remember what the
maybe.
conversation was either, but
I do want to talk about your first HR.
so this was one I still wasn't even allowed to do anything by myself. It was the first hostage rescue that I responded to as part of SWAT. And Lieutenant Younger told me, hey, follow Sergeant Rose around. And Jim Rose, he's kind of polarizing. People either love him or hate him, and I love him. I found a lot of great leadership qualities in him, and I learned what people did like about him, and I tried to adopt those different characteristics and the things that they didn't like about him. I don't think I ever had an issue with in using the same methods that he used sometimes. But it was a hostage rescue on Bruton, and there was a either young male that had taken his grandma hostage inside an apartment. And I ended up getting put into the neighboring apartment. And I walk in there, and I remember Rick Martinez is over there playing with explosives. And I didn't know much about him at this point. I was still new enough. I'm looking, and he's over there building a charge to put a hole in a wall. But we don't know where to put it. And so we're trying to use these weird cameras that we have, but it requires drilling into the sheetrock. And, there's smaller holes that go into different portions of the wall, and then you can attach the camera and you can see in. And Rose leaves me in there. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm kind of running this, because he starts calling me on the radio, asking me what's going on in there. And I'm like, okay, this is me. So I'm taking a little survey of the room, and Rick's over there doing his thing, and he's got one or two other guys with him. I can't remember who else it was, because Rick was the one that kept telling me, hey, don't step on that. I was like, sorry, I pace when I'm nervous. Leave me alone. I look over, and JT Curtis is sitting in a chair, like a sofa chair. And JT is built like an action figure. He has biceps the size of most people's legs. He has garden hoses running through his arms like veins. I mean, he is a specimen of a man. Mind you, he's probably 50 years old at that point, right? Maybe older. And he's just sitting in the chair in his pants and t-shirt. He has no gun belt. He has no heavy vest. He has no helmet. And his safety glasses are up on his head. And his eyes are closed. And his pistol is sitting on his lap. And I'm like, is this MF seriously taking a nap right now? And I'm just looking at him, and I guess I had that look on my face, and someone was like, hey, leave him alone. And I was like, what is he doing? And they were like, when that hole goes in that wall, he's the one that's going to stand up and take a shot. He's getting himself ready. Just leave him alone. And I was like, that dude's on a different level. Like, when you can he was like intentionally lowering his heart rate and focusing and visualizing what he was going to do next. And it was, again, I'm brand new. I probably had my vest on backwards. I don't know what was going on. So to see him at that level, I was like, okay, this is pretty serious. So now my job is to work with the guys that are working on the camera. Lieutenant Younger's in my ear every 3 to 5 minutes. Can you see anything? Where are you at with the camera? We probably drilled 6 holes in the wall of that apartment. And every time we got there, we were like, is there a firewall or something? Like, where are we? We can't see anything into this next door apartment. We ended up not getting able to see inside. And they ended up tripping over a car door, JB, while they made it. But everything ended peacefully. And I'm just flabbergasted about what is going on. Like, why can we not see into this neighboring apartment? So we talked to the management. Like, do you guys know about a firewall between these two? And they're like, no, there's nothing there. It's just one wall into the next. Very thin walls. I don't think so. So we go next door and we look, and this thing has the biggest headboard of any bed I've ever seen in my life. And we probably put 4 holes into the headboard. And then we decided, hey, let's go higher, right? Like let's get way up in the corners, look down. Picture frames. We drilled 6 holes, and you're doing this is like quietly, right? You don't want to use a Makita, right? You're not trying to make noise. You're trying to be silent. So it's a hand drill, and you're in there just making little micro pinholes. And every time you do it, it's just pitch black. And you're like, this is the only job they gave me, was to make a hole to where we can see what's going on here, and I can't do it. And I just completely failed. And I remember just like, golly, this is so frustrating. And like, I'm not even supposed to be inside the perimeter, right? I'm supposed to be back with the lieutenant. I just got left here and dropped to do this.
Supposed to be driving an APC and
busting
finding more
tires.
tires.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I was just like, that's the craziest thing I've ever been a part of, was looking around and seeing the guys, like, everybody's doing their job and everybody knows what their job is. There's no bickering back and forth. There's no arguing about anything. They're all just doing it. And then JT Curtis, the rodeo cowboy SWAT guy, just calm as can be, not an ounce of nerves in him, and just waiting for something to blow up so he can go do something. And I was like, yeah, this is going to be really cool.
Yeah. Fast forward to another HR that I believe Brian Candelaria, is this High Crest? Is that the one that Brian touched on?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you talk about that, Kent?
Oh, that was an interesting one. I'll address that part afterwards. We get the phone call, and I think Sergeant Jones got the phone call because you guys were primary on that one. So we all kind of rally up. About 12:30 at night, the 911 call comes in. Man called and said that he got run out of his house by his wife, that they got into an argument, and she pulled a gun and shot at him when he was running down the street. So we show up around about 2 o'clock. Patrol got out there and did their thing, controlled everything, called for us. By the time we get out there, it's about 2 o'clock. So we start the typical stuff of a hostage situation, right? There's different philosophies on what you do on a hostage deal. You can either, they know you're there or they don't know you're there. The fact that Patrol had been there long enough let us know, they probably know we're here. So we started reaching out, trying to make phone calls, trying to loud hail, see what we could get. And after about an hour, the little boy was released. So mom's inside with the son and the daughter. I think the son's about 12 years old and the daughter's about 9. Well, the husband's still at the command post, and he's not giving us a whole lot of information. The son comes out, and they start debriefing him a little bit and trying to find out what he can tell us. And they said something about how he said, "Mom's right here," and he pointed at the hallway, right in the middle of the house. And we're getting like a halfway drawn on a whiteboard diagram of what's going on. Not a whole lot of great information on that. So we're out there doing everything we can, trying to elicit any response from the mother inside. She's gone completely silent. She doesn't talk to us anymore. She won't answer the phone. We can't hear anything. We can't see anything through windows. Like there's nothing going on. We put a couple of robots into the house trying to listen, trying to see, is she walking around? Is she in a certain room? Because you can determine a lot of what you want to do and how you're going to defeat this puzzle based on if you know where they're at, right? If you know what room they're in, even it's going to be 100 times easier than just going into a house that you don't know where they're at. So we don't get any response for about 3.5 hours, and about 6:25 a.m. We're deciding, hey, we need to do something, right? Let's go inside and see what we can find out. And we tried going in through the back. We tried peeking in windows. We broke in a couple windows. Anything to, get a startle response. Get her to scream at us, get her to tell her to stop, anything, and there's nothing going on. So we come up with a plan. We start executing the plan, and the plan goes sideways pretty quickly inside the house. And it's difficult to explain, but you walked into a living room, and immediately to your right there was a hallway. But the hallway had a door. Like I've never seen a door on a hallway. So when you open the door to the hallway, that door swings open and blocks the door to a closet. So the first one or two guys made it through there. They saw that door and they decided that's there. Like that's where we need to get into. The plan was to eliminate where she wasn't, figure out where she was, and let's reassess from there and figure out what we can do. But your best laid plans sometimes fall apart in the middle of action. So they start trying to open that door, which shut off the rest of the team, right? You had to close the door to the hallway to get the other door open. So they're wrestling, playing the door game there. Shots start coming through that door. Not knowing where the shots are coming from, we can't do much, right? We can't shoot back into a closet because shots are coming out. So we back out, get everybody out of the house. The first two guys in the house actually got hit with bullets. One got it in the vest, one got hit in the rifle, and it hits his arm. So now I'm dealing with that. I've got two guys that I don't think the number one guy knew that he got hit, but the guy that got hit in the rifle was like, hey, I'm hit, and we're looking at him, take all his stuff off, clean him up. I run him all the way back to the command post because he's, you're kind of like, that's not the guy you want to put back into a house, right? He's already been shot one time. It's going to be a whole lot better for everybody if he's back at the command post and figures that part out. So I take him back there, and as we're taking him back there, we hear two more shots. And that's the last we hear out of anything. And I think it was another couple hours. We're still trying to loud hail. We're still trying to phone call. And it turns out those last two shots were the mother. She shot her daughter in the head, and her daughter's head was laying in her lap because she shot her daughter's head like all the way through her head and shot herself in the leg and then turned the gun on herself. That was a tough one. We didn't have any sort of wellness unit at that point. And I think not only was it an operational failure, but it was a departmental failure on how we handled that and what came almost immediately after that. Melvin Williams was my negotiator on that deal, and he had young children. And I remember he tried to come into the house to look at what was going on. I stopped him. I was like, dude, you don't need to see that, right? Like, he's got twin boys and girls, right? So I didn't want him walking in on that. My son at the time was right around that same age, my youngest, and I didn't look at it. Like, I didn't want to go in the closet. But even when we went into the closet, when she was deceased, everybody was deceased, it took us several minutes to get to where they were. So as far as assaulting that location and winning that hostage rescue, I don't think we ever would have. And that's not an answer that sits well with anybody who does this for a living. There was a lot of questions about the tactics we used and the methods we used and the fact that we did pull out when we were getting shot at, because typically on a hostage rescue, your whole thing is to go ahead and eat bullets because they're not shooting at the hostage. But this lady was so well secreted and in such a defensive location, like she could have reloaded several times before we got to her. And it's by the grace of God that we all walked out of there without serious injury. But the little girl, her name was Milani. I remember I was loud hailing because my negotiator was all the way back at the command post still trying to work. So I was on the loud hail all night long saying, Milani, you can come outside. Everything's going to be all right. And it didn't turn out that everything was all right. And again, the command staff kind of does this weird thing where they try to tell you that, you did the best you could. Sometimes they try to use that line, and you can't stomach that. It almost makes you nauseous. Our command staff at the time was not super supportive of anything, and yeah, that was one that broke me pretty good. I had a really hard time dealing with that, and was it something that I did or didn't do? Matt drove into me that your job is to make sure that we do everything possible to win these scenarios, right? If there's another tactic we can use, if there's anything else we can do, throw it in there, right? Like, you can't overdo these things. You have to win them, and we didn't win that one. But I also, rationally, you can say there's certain scenarios that you're just not going to win, but you're not in your rational mind when you're dealing with that. So a lot of that's just hard to take.
Yeah, we might be able to pick one or two out and say that this is impossible, but what doesn't sit well is that we didn't do absolutely everything possible to do our best. And that's what really hits the guys, knowing that, there are shortcomings, the things we could do better, whether we believe it's impossible or not. And at the time, it never even really crosses our mind that these things are impossible, right? It's like, are we going with the mindset that we're going to win? And to not win, there are guys who, we take that hard.
Yeah, I never in my mind at one time thought we couldn't win. And I hate to say win, it's not a game. Be successful in securing that little girl and getting her out of there. Then the lady wants to do whatever, that's fine. It still bothers me now. That was May of 2020. And if you were there, again, when Rick Martinez popped those hinges off that door, I'm the one that leaned in there and saw it, and I remember, like, that image is burned into your mind, like several things I have from my career, and it's hard to do. I got young kids. The humanity in it, regardless of what your kids' age they are, if you even had them, there's nothing about you that says that what you're looking at is right or correct. That's hard to deal with, and it's hard to, and I will never ever forget that operation. I still revert back to that many times in my thinking through operations, that what are we not thinking of? What can we do differently? Is what they're telling you on the radio the absolute thing that's being done or whatever? Remember being called back to the CP. Lieutenant Vernon called us back, if you remember. Mm-hmm. He and I went back, and he was just like, what are we not doing? What can we do differently? And it was, I don't think we can sit here all day long and talk about how we never got past all that.
Yeah. Now, the part that I didn't allude to earlier, in February, I had applied to leave SWAT to go to K9. And in mid-February, they told me that I got the position, but they hadn't let me left. So February, March, April, May, June, July, August, I finally leave SWAT. And there's some other stuff that happens before that. But if I could tell anything to current or future command staff members, is if you have somebody especially in the SWAT role, that even starts talking about how they are done and they're ready to leave, it's very, very difficult to stay as sharp as you need to mentally when you know that you're leaving. And I question, is that part of what happened that night? Like, was I just not as sharp as I should have been? And I hate that there's that sitting over it also.
Well, I don't think it has anything to do. I agree with you. I think, once people need to start doing that, that's fine. Bill Parcells says, when you start talking about retirement, you're retired. So I believe that to be a factor, sure. I don't think it had anything to do with what happened that night, because I was right there next to you the whole day. So I don't think that had anything to do with it. I think I just think it's natural to go back and think about that and go, hey, could I have done something differently? Go back and look at our videos. We were talking about everything.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that we did a great job. Nobody did, but like, we were trying. But I can say 100% certain it had nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I can't.
2020, right after that, what happens?
Well, to context, it wasn't Highcrest the third hostage rescue in 30 hours.
Yeah, we did 2 back to back, just the day before that. Yeah,
and then a week later, the riots kicked off.
Yeah, that was a busy month.
Now, again, going back to the wellness thing, and a departmental failure of taking care of the guys. We shouldn't have been put in the situation that we were with the riots. You know, the deployment of the SWAT team right after going through all that, and these guys won't say no. Like if you tell them, hey, this is what we're doing, they're going to show up. But somebody up higher should have been paying attention to what was going on, because I think a lot of the problems that came out of after that are directly related to the fact that some people weren't in the right headspace to be put into the situations they were in. And I take responsibility for that some. You know, I take a lot of ownership on that because I was the closest person of the supervision. But I also think I was too close to see it myself.
The protests and the riots that went on, and Ken Delaria talked about the effects on him, and he's been open about the toll it took on him, and going back to those hostage rescues leading into that. Can you talk about, as much as you can, the protest and that turned into riots? And Danny and I talked quite a bit after this, and one of the craziest and wildest time, not just in Dallas, but in the world.
It was like being in a Ridley Scott movie. I'm literally, I remember sitting in Dallas and almost like an out-of-body experience where I'm just kind of turning and looking at everything that's going on. There's dumpsters on fire in the middle of Deep Ellum, and there's a guy on a motorcycle, like a dirt bike, like doing, nitro circus stuff in the middle of the street, and there's still people out at the bar on the second floor sitting over watching it, and there's smoke just pouring from places. Some of it's stuff that we let off, some of it's stuff that people started fires. I remember I walked off for something. I can't remember maybe I was taking a phone call. I always walk away from the situation when I'm taking a phone call, which is stupid. And I wasn't even on the phone because I had my gas mask on. And I walk under a bridge, and I turn a corner, and there's 3 guys, and they have glass bottles with rags sticking out of them. And I had a real bad habit of leaving my rifle in the APC, especially on long nights where, we'd been up for 12 hours or so and it got heavy, and I was like, I'm not going to use it anyway. I point to problems more than I point guns at problems. So I look over at them, and they look at me, and it's kind of like we're all Labradors turning our head like we just heard something crazy. And I index my pistol, and I just start shaking my head no. And those guys turn around, drop their bottles, and walk off. And I was like, good Lord, like, where are we right now? What in the Mad Max is happening? And it was, especially for us, the first 2 nights were back and forth. We had this plan of, the riots were at City Hall. And so we were like, okay, we're going to go in here. We're going to turn right. We're going to do this and push them this direction. We went right. Somebody went left. We got split up. Never saw them again for the rest of the night. Another 8 hours of just chaos, and the lieutenant calling us over the radio, hey, who's close over here that can go take this? We'll go over there. Who's over here? We'll go over there. And we're just back and forth and back and forth. And, I'd say 90% of it was protests and 10% of it was riots, but the protests got ate up by the riots. The rioters were in the protest. It was masterfully done by the turds that wanted to cause chaos. They did a great job of causing chaos, and we did a horrible job of reacting to it. But it was a much larger failure of leadership than it was a failure of our actions. There was no coordination. We were just basically responding to prairie fires. Like, there's a fire over here, go put that out. Hey, the fire just jumped over here, go put that out. There's a fire over here. And instead of doing anything to stop the entirety of it, we were just dealing with small symptoms over and over again.
We would be we're all split up, so we'd be in small groups of like 3 or 4 guys, and something would come out over the radio, and then we just hoof it on foot over to the other side of downtown. I think the second day, night, and then my watch said we put on 19 miles on our feet in gear. You know, Matt and I have some pretty good stories being together on the second night and chasing guys who shot guns at moms holding their babies and
peaceful protesters.
Yeah, I mean it was pretty crazy.
Yeah,
yeah.
You talk to any officer that had been here, even much longer than us at that time. They're like, I've never seen anything like that. I still haven't in all my time. My personal record on Garmin is still that day, Saturday night. But the most steps I've ever done in a day is still my personal record.
Which night was it that they smashed your entire fleet?
That was Friday, first night, because we left headquarters way late, pulled in there, and I parked right in front of the federal building right there on, was it Young, right there, and about 7 of us, and they just got us, because when we bailed out, the crowd was 2 blocks up to the northeast. And within 30 minutes, they had pivoted and came right back, and they just like locust going right through that area and just destroyed our Tahoes.
Tires, windows.
Yeah, I had that truck 2 weeks. It's brand new. Yeah,
you were livid.
It's always like that was the most composed I think I ever see, because they were so worried about me. I was like, that's it, because I was bad.
You talk about Ridley Scott movie. So the first night kicks off. We go home at like 4:30 in the morning.
Right back.
We come right back at like 9, 10 o'clock. Lieutenant kind of briefs us on like, well, here's what the command staff's talking about. 2 hours later, while we're sitting at the station waiting for it to kick off, it kicks off at noon at City Hall, and we get put out there to save officers because we're watching live on TV. The patrol officers drive right in and immediately get swarmed by about 3,000 people. And I still remember we pull up down the street so we can offload, and I go running up on foot to deal with this crowd. And I get to these squad cars, and the windows are all smashed, and I see movement inside. And so I open the door, and the car is full of officers with their gas masks on, just sitting there while they're completely swarmed by this crowd. And I'm asking them, are you good? And they're kind of through the gas mask. We're good. I'm like, get out of the car. So I'm grabbing them, and right as I do, I turn around, and there are 3 guys with masks, plate carriers, and AK rifles standing right behind me trying to give some kind of intimidating look. And I remember turning around to the officers and I said, hold on a second. And I turned around and like kind of basically said, let's do this. Let's throw down. I mean, what are you trying to do? And they kind of sauntered off and just walked away after that. But like Kent says, a Ridley Scott movie, there was
a little Michael Bay too. There was a lot of special effects.
There are so many stories we have, like little pockets of things that happen that are just bizarre that it'd be an interesting movie.
Yeah, it was just an ad hoc weekend. Just it was insane. It was crazy.
Well, it changed everybody. I mean, and it also it put a lot of people in a lot of bad situations that changed the trajectory of their life and careers. And many years later, we kind of talked about you having to sit with the DA.
Yeah, so there was some charges brought against some of the guys that worked for us, and initially they had tried to indict, I think, 4 of the guys that worked with me, including me. So we sat through the grand jury on that, and they came back with a no bill all the way across. And then they re-indicted, or they tried to indict 2 guys again, and I believe we got a no bill then. And so then they charged them with misdemeanors and then upgraded it to felony offenses so that they didn't have to go through the grand jury process. And again, those guys their brains were fried at that point, right? Like, you're talking about guys that had been involved in 3 hostage rescues and then, multiple 16, 18-hour days of work in, conditions that nobody's ever experienced. And should we be held accountable for our actions? Absolutely. But I don't believe that all of the actions that they went after were what they said they were. And it was an interesting meeting. I was in there with the lead prosecutor, who was one of the chiefs of the DA's office, and his investigator. And the actual DA, John Crusoe, would pop in and out fairly regularly. And it seemed almost like it was an intimidation tactic. He's not an imposing man. Like, he's not intimidating in that manner. But knowing that you have the DA in there and asking you questions, and knowing they're recorded, and knowing that they're wanting you to provide evidence against guys that worked for you and that were right next to you when this whole thing was going on, that was a pretty good assault on the mind there. You know, and I actually said it on record, like, this is one of the weirdest things I've ever done. You're asking me to provide information to convict not just people that I worked with, but people that I consider friends, right? Like people that I've had over to my house, and I know their children, you know, I know their wives, and that's the relationship you have with these guys. You know, it's not just a working relationship of you show up and we all make widgets and we go home and you're the widget maker. You know, we spend regularly 16-hour days together. You know, it might be in the same car. We are stupidly close to each other way too often, and not with our families much. So you, by default, become family, and you start to know these guys. And then you're talking about trying to put these guys into positions that you know are extremely dangerous, right? Like, at what point do I put Daniel, whose wife and kids are expecting him to come home? Hey, Danny, I need you to be the first guy through the door on this hostage rescue where this guy said he's going to shoot everybody that comes through the door. You know, and that's the burden I have. And now Danny's like, hell yeah. You know, that's where I'm supposed to be. But if anything happens, like, that's the decision that I initially made, right? I approved all that. And I think if you're in that position and you take it serious, that has to weigh on you. You know, that's a heavy weight that you carry, knowing that you're putting people that you know and that you like into positions that you wouldn't put people that you don't like.
Right. It's a lot to carry.
I was like, well, true leadership has responsibilities and it has weight to it. And when you talk about being a supervisor, people think, oh, it's just get more money, or you're the boss, you don't do as much. The real side of that is that you're having to do, you know, and ask us to go do things that you recognize that are, you know, not that we don't know it. Danny and I are completely aware of the dangers and everything that we're going into. Like, it doesn't fall, you know, deaf on our ears. At the same time, you're like, yeah, but it's still a different perspective that you have to do that Danny and I don't have to think about.
Well, if I didn't put you in the front of the lineup on anything, you'd be offended. Yeah. Right? And
we're going to get there. Yeah.
Rightfully so. Yeah. But it as you progress through your career and you start to realize, like, hey, I'm really putting these guys in bad spots. Yeah. And that's what was really frustrating when we go all the way back to 2016 when they took training away. Now you're asking me to put these guys in spots, and I had new guys. You know, I didn't have the super senior squad that I showed up with that knew what they were doing. I had new guys that we had to evaluate and we had to train and we had to make sure they were doing things right, and they took the training away. And now you're still asking me to put these guys in positions and not giving me the ability to tell you, yes, they can do it. Like, I know for certain my guys can handle any situation that comes, but I can't tell you that because we haven't been training it. We haven't been practicing.
That was the worst year. Yeah, it was a terrible year.
Yeah, no, that was bad.
Yeah.
So you just kind of walked us through everything that you have to look at through a higher lens as a leader, putting people in bad situations, and you wanted to leave. You months later, because of COVID, you know, just the state that the world was in at that time and the department was in, you have to stay longer than you really wanted to. You did your time, and you had a conversation with Chief Mora.
Yeah, so that was when I was in K-9. Okay. I'd been in K-9 for a while, and it was, I believe Mora was a major at that point because we didn't have a lieutenant for a long time when I was over in K-9, so I was having to do the lieutenant job too, and she was doing her part of carrying that load too. And I don't remember exactly what was said, but I do remember she kind of stopped what she was doing and she looked up at me. And if you know Chief Mora, she's not a really BS person. You know, you're not going to have a lot of conversations about, you know, how much we love hamburgers. You know, it's just she's she's very direct, and I really appreciate that about her, because there's not any, you don't have to guess what she's saying. But she said, "Hey, do you need to talk to somebody?" And I was like, I probably do. And I remember kind of laughing about it, but that was one of the catalysts of me actually going and talking to somebody. I was like, I've seen some things, I've experienced some things. I probably should go talk to somebody, and just before it all falls apart, like, let's get in front of it a little bit. And that's when I go home and start looking on the ATO website of the confidential counseling, and I start looking at the forms. And again, I hate forms. Like, I applied to one college. I didn't apply to any others. I applied to one police department. I don't like repetitively filling out forms. It's something that just drives me insane, and I can't explain it. So I probably started filling out those forms, 5 or 6 times, and I would just stop because I got frustrated of, like, why do you need my name again? Like, couldn't you just be on one sheet of paper? Like, why does this need to be the same thing? And I just kept going back to it and looking at it and like, okay, let me print these forms off again, and let me try again, and let me start here and do that. And during that time, my middle son, Cade, he had like absolute control over my temper. Like, if he wanted to set me off, he could just like wink, and I would lose it. I'd fly off the handle over and over again at him. And I was like, he's not a bad kid. Like, he's a good kid, but every little thing he does would drive me insane. And I was like, I got to get to the bottom of that. Like, what is going on with my relationship with my son? Like, why am I so angry with him? And I'm not angry at him. Like, I think the world of him, but all my anger was channeled from work, from experience, from everything, and I was taking it out on him, and that wasn't fair to a 14, 13-year-old kid. So I ended up going to see Dottie Claggett. And
why Dottie?
So it wasn't until you had her on the podcast, actually, and I listened to her episode, and I'd always thought, if I go to any therapist, they're not going to be able to understand what I talk about, right? I'll probably destroy them, just like I would my wife if I actually told her everything that goes on. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to just trauma dump on somebody. But in talking with Dottie, or listening to Dottie's episode, and understanding what she'd been through as a police officer and who her husband was, and the fact that she would have a better understanding of everything that I could possibly talk about, it just clicked, and I was like, I could talk to her. Like, let's do that. And so I reached out, and I was like, hey, I think I really need to talk to somebody. And she was like, just come in. Don't worry about the forms. Because I told her, like, I can't fill these forms out. I hate these forms. And she was like, don't even worry about the forms. Just come on. And so I went in, met her the first time, and we, basically just had a conversation. And it was, I almost felt stupid, like, sitting in there. Because she's asking questions like, how's things, are you eating? Are you drinking water? Like, what do you do to deal with stress? And I'm like, I don't. Like, I'm replacing sleep with caffeine, and I'm eating a ton of processed food, and I'm not exercising. Like, all those things compounded together, and like, your body runs off water, right? It's a complete system. Your brain is connected to your heart, and your heart's connected to your lungs, and it all works together. So if you don't take care of one part, or all of it, it just starts to fall apart. So water instead of caffeine, or, water to at least flush your caffeine out. Drink as much water as you possibly can. It's great for you. Your body needs it. Maybe get some real sleep, break your sleep pattern that you're currently in of staying up all night and then waking up early and, pouring an energy drink into your eyes just to feel a little bit of burn and go from there. It just took a little bit of me saying it out loud, and I was like, well, this is just absolutely ridiculous that I'm just not doing anything that I know I should be doing, right? Exercise is good for you. It moves things around. If you have toxins in your body and you use your muscles, the blood flows there and it moves everything around, and then the water flushes it out. It's very, very basic anatomy, but it was things that I was ignoring. And so once I said it out loud, I was like, well, that makes complete sense. And then we talked about breathing a little bit, and we'd talked about breathing in SWAT. We always made fun of Ryan Scott for breathing heavy. But the box breathing was something that was huge for me. And I didn't bring this up yet, but when I was in SWAT, I had like some pretty bad anxiety. It would hit me at night, especially if we had anything that was going on the next day. I would wake up about 2:00 in the morning in a cold sweat, and then I would get hot, and then I would get cold, and then I would be nauseous. And so I was making myself throw up over and over again because once I got out whatever was in my stomach, it wasn't what I was causing it. I thought my wife was poisoning me, but she wasn't. I would go throw up, and I would put a hoodie on, and I would go get back in bed, and I would be fine. And I was like, what is going on? Like, why does this keep happening? And I realized that was how my anxiety was manifesting. And so I started to look into anxiety, like what causes anxiety? Well, guess what's not great for anxiety? Caffeine.
This job.
Yeah, well, that too, right? Life in general is not great for it. So I was basically feeding anxiety and then allowing it to beat me up and trying to just walk through it. And what's crazy was once I got to work, the anxiety was gone. But one of the things that really drove it was the youth football stuff. When I'm coaching these kids, and I think it was part of like my biggest fear ever is failure. And I don't accept failure on my part. If I came to work with the SWAT guys, we don't fail, right? It's not allowed. It's not the SOP, so we don't do it. But with these kids, if they lost, we failed. And so on my way to youth football games, I would be so nauseous. And I was like, this is the dumbest thing in the world. Like, we literally saved a kidnapped baby from another state last night, and I was fine. But I'm going to play flag football with a bunch of little kids, and I'm nervous as you could believe. Like, I'm shaking nervous. And so I was like, okay, I got to figure this stuff out. So I started focusing on breathing, and really, man, box breathing is one of the coolest things. You can take yourself out of a complete panic if you just slow your breathing down, control it, tell yourself, hey, this is where we're actually at. All right, we're not in the middle of anything right now. You're here now. Just breathe, relax. And I was like, I felt so dumb. Like, why am I in such a panic over kids sports? This doesn't mean anything. Like, these aren't high school kids. They're elementary school kids. But the thought of failing them would drive me to nausea.
How did you combat that with Dottie, other than just talking?
So that part was a little bit further. It was a little bit deeper, and it was more the 2005 stuff, the car accident with that. That's what I focused on with Dottie. And that was something that it was 17 years. I did it about 4 years ago. Dealing with that, I never dealt with it, right? I just let it happen, and I'd never really talked about it. I tried to talk about it one time at an in-service class, and man, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I was like, okay, that was a really weird response. Like, why was I so nervous and quivering up in front of a class? Like, I speak in front of people all the time. It's not a big deal. But I never dealt with that. And so when I went to Dottie, that's the first thing we talked about, because she was like, well, let's start at the beginning of your career. And I told her what happened. She's like, all right, we're going to hit there. And that was something that for 17 years, every day I had thought about it, and it was crystal clear. Relive it over and over again. And it wasn't like the constant thought in my mind, but it was, there's always that
dark
thought.
Cloud.
And she says, I want to try EMDR. And I was like, me too. Right? Like, that's basically why I'm here. And so we do one session of EMDR, and she kept asking me, like, where do you feel this? And I was like, I don't know, I don't really know, like, in my chest, like, I don't know, my back is a little tense. Like, I don't know if that's what she was meaning, but she let me go on with it, and we just kept doing it. And, I came back for another session of EMDR, and slowly that image, I can't bring it up clearly anymore. And so it faded, and I tell everybody it's like it pixelates on the TV, like your signal's going out a little bit. And then it gets to a point where, like, I can't clearly bring up the memory anymore. And I go weeks without considering, the events that happened that day. And it was really foreign when it first happened, because I was like, man, that's like something's missing from my day. But it wasn't something that I wanted, right? It was just something that was not there anymore. So,
what'd you learn most about yourself going through all this?
That's a deep one.
Yeah, nobody's listening. You can be honest.
Yeah,
you
for
can be
sure.
honest.
Probably that I can't handle everything that I think I can by myself. And that's a tough one when you spend your whole life telling yourself that you can, and thinking that that's what you're supposed to do. Like I said, my dad was a mountain. Like, he was just a man's man. I don't know that the only time I saw him cry was when I graduated college. And that was weird. It was really weird to see him cry for that, because I was like, college to me was an expectation, right? Like, it wasn't like, hey, I did it. No, it was like, hey, good job, you did it, right? That you were supposed to. And that's kind of how I've dealt with most things in my life. Is they're not accomplishments, they're expectations. You're supposed to do that. So I'd never considered not going to college or not finishing college. It wasn't an option. But I was the first person in my family to go to college and finish. So my dad was super proud about it, and it brought him to tears. And I was just like, weird, like, never seen that before. But then you have your own kids, and you start to realize their accomplishments mean way more than anything you've ever done. So, sorry that I laughed at you for that one, Pops. But, yeah, just knowing that you don't have to do everything by yourself is really big.
Kent, I got a final question. There are several officers out there that are just starting their job, or several veteran officers that have been carrying weight of responding to calls, working on their marriage, working on their second divorce, that are carrying so much from personal and professional life. What advice would you give them in dealing with the pressures of having a long career and also performing?
So there's a theory that I came across recently, and it's called the 4-burner theory. And the premise is you have a stovetop, and you have 4 burners on your stovetop. One's family, one's work, one's friends, and one is health. And you can't keep them all going, right? Like, it's very, very difficult to serve all 4 at the same time. So the easiest one to ignore is family, because they're pretty much going to be there regardless, right? So you put more focus on work, maybe more focus on friends or health. And they say that most successful people ignore 1. And they say the super successful people ignore 2. So then your focus is more than likely going to be work and maybe health. That's because your family's pretty easy to put on the back burner, because you go home to them every night. They're there, right? They're going to be there. Work is a little bit easier to control because it's measurable, right? You put in your work, you attend to it. But your health is another one that's a little bit difficult sometimes, but we tend to put a focus on health. And then you have friends. And as you get older and you have your own family and you have your own job, you start to stray away from the people that you've grown up with and your former friends or your oldest friends that you can still talk to, but you usually don't. And as men, we're so poured into our jobs and trying to provide for our families and maybe get your health part in. We don't have a whole lot of friends. As you get older, you just don't have friends. Like, who do you hang out with outside of work? You probably go home to your wife and get beat up by your wife and kids, right? So it's important to also have your friends. It's just easier to focus on a few than it is to focus on everything. And if you really want to grow in one area, you shut off the others. But the best thing you can do is to decide which ones you want to focus on, and then be intentional with your your actions from there. I've told everybody that's ever interviewed in SWAT that if your family life is not prepared to go to SWAT, then you're going to have a hard time with it, right? And even then, it becomes your mistress. You drop everything that you can for your family over and over again, and you go to SWAT work, right?
It's a lifestyle.
SWAT calls, you go.
Yeah.
And I told myself early, before I even went to SWAT, that I was not going to be a SWAT guy. Like, I did not want my reputation to be, oh, that's the guy from SWAT. And then I found myself identifying more and more with that. And that's part of the reason that I was like, okay, I need to leave, right? There's things that I need to go. I need to put my focus back where I need to have it. And that's my family and my health. Because as much as, yeah, hey, you get to work out on duty. No, you don't. If I show up at the same time everybody else to work out, guess who has a question and guess who they go to for it, right? Like, Carl Marquez wants me to go over and do his payroll or fix something that he had screwed up somewhere, and somebody else has a question about something, and so I'm trying to run on the treadmill. I'm already out of shape. I can't breathe, and you're trying to talk to me, and I'm just like, okay, let me get off the treadmill and go deal with whatever it is you need. My health declined while I was in SWAT, which I would say probably everybody's does if you take a look in the mirror what you look like there. But you gotta really focus on which burner you want to tend to and which one is full, and then which one is dying, and are you okay with that setup of your kitchen there, right? So it's great to be successful at your job, and that's one of the things that I've always wanted to be known for. And growing up, my dad owned his own business, and he used to throw holiday parties, and everybody would always come by and tell me how great my dad was. And I remember it because I was proud of him, but I was also like, Dad's never home, right? He's always working. He's always out of town. And Mom's always there, but that was because Dad was working so hard, right? Mom could always afford to be at whatever game or whatever practice or whatever party I needed to go to. Mom was great about that. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized Dad he wanted to be there. He was that's who he is. He's a worker. He puts all his time into that, and I'm very much the same way. And it drove me nuts that I was ignoring my family. And so you choose which burner you want to go to, and you need to make that decision before it gets too bad, right? You need to decide, is my family more important than this job? And I was very fortunate that I had my family's support to do the job as long as I did, but I felt like I neglected them while I was there, and that's not what I wanted to be known for. So remember that when you leave the job keeps going, regardless of how good you are at it. And if you leave your family, like, that doesn't keep going. So pay attention to which burner you're tending to.
Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. Down when you're lonely, I'll pull you up. Life leaves you heavy when the going gets tough. I'll be your shoulder, together we'll run up from the bottom, yeah, we'll rise above. Hey brother, hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far the sun and the moon, I'll never give up on you. hey sister, I'll never give up on you. Hey Mrs., hey mister, I'll see this all the way through. No matter how far, for the gold and the blue, I'll never give up.